Hey guys, tonight we slip through a barely lit alley behind Warsaw's Kino Murano, rain freckles tapping on dust-caked windows as you pull the collar of your threadbare overcoat tighter. The autumn of 1939 tastes like damp charcoal and boiled cabbage, and you probably won't survive this if you breathe too deeply. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Toss your city and local time into the comments so I know how far these echoes reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shoulder open a courtyard gate that squeals in protest, waking two pigeons that explode skyward like shrapnel made of feathers. A smell of wet soot and yesterday's vodka hangs low. Warsaw's half-sleeping shop fronts offer lopsided cakes and frayed newspapers, but the real whispers skitter along gutter edges. Armies mobilize, borders bleed, and certain basements are suddenly very popular with men in uniform. Your boots splash across puddles that mirror street lamps, each ripple erasing one more measure of ordinary life. Inside a cramped flat above the cobblers, women huddle around a coal stove, steam groping the cracked ceiling. They talk of mobile houses of relaxation, a phrase that rolls off tongues like warm pastry but tastes of iron chains. Mainstream fact time. In early September 1939, days after German troops stormed across the Vistula, occupation officials issued directives permitting military brothels under garrison control. Everyone inside this room knows what that really means, even if nobody wrecks the air with the word prostitution. A woman named Anya fingers a chipped cameo and jokes that her resume now reads National Morale Consultant in 5 languages. Light joke number 1, delivered with a sideways grin that barely hides trembling hands. You nibble stale rye bread while listening. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Local fortune tellers have started using red lipstick to stamp their tarot cards, claiming the colour wards off sexually transmitted curses. The stove pops and you nearly drop your slice. Someone laughs about lipstick protection being cheaper than a French letter, and the mood lifts, teetering on the tightrope between hysteria and gallows humour. Joke 2. Outside, martial law notices flap on every pole. Curfew at dusk, ration coupons at dawn, and an ominous line about recreational facilities. Historians still argue whether these early decrees were meant to regulate vice or to funnel profits straight into Wehrmacht payrolls. You study Anya's face as she counts coins that never add up. Her eyes look older than her mother's wedding portrait hanging lopsided on the wall. Horses clatter down the cobblestones, drawing a covered wagon branded with a crimson cross that might once have promised medical aid. Now it ferries mattresses and kerosene lamps toward the riverside warehouses. Your chest tightens, sensing the wagon's real cargo will soon include warm bodies wearing forced smiles. You wonder which of these women will be volunteered, which will volunteer themselves because an empty stomach trumps morality every single hunger pang. Fact 2. By October, Warsaw's scarcity grows fierce enough that a cigarette can buy a winter coat. That cigarette often comes from a soldier's rations after a 10-minute negotiation behind blackout curtains. The courtyard fills with the metallic scent of rain and horse sweat. You move to the window, palms leaving ghost prints on the glass. Across the street, a tailor flips his sign to closed, though it is barely noon. He slips into the same tavern that last week installed velvet booths and a back entrance wide enough for a field ambulance. Small upgrades, big implications. Joke 3 lands in your head unbidden. Call it wartime interior design, rustic chic with optional venereal flair. Your laugh catches in your throat because it is too true to be funny. Evening edges closer, painting the sky the colour of weak tea. Candlelight flickers in third-floor windows where silhouettes sway like marionettes. A train whistle moans in the distance, promising departures to unnamed destinations. Rumour says some of those trains carry portable brothels disguised as field hospitals, complete with doctors whose main prescription is temporary exhilaration. No one knows if passengers go willingly or under duress, because testimony disappears as quickly as the trains themselves. The scholarly debate will rage years later, but tonight you only feel the cold leak through cracked plaster. Ania presses a bundle of laundry into your arms. "Take these to Mrs. Zielinska on Fretta Street," she whispers. You set out, slogging past murals of white and red eagles now smeared by jackboots. The city smells of coal dust and quiet panic. At Fretta Street, a queue snakes from a bakery, people eager for half loaves that might stave off hunger long enough to face tomorrow's indignities. You shoulder through, deliver the bundle, and Mrs. Zielinska slips you a note sealed with wax. The message, revealed later under attic light, maps an underground path towards safety or servitude, if misread. Back in the flat, night has swallowed the last colours. Lamps burn whale oil substitutes that make your throat itch. Women practice forced smiles in a cracked mirror, lipstick trembling like they are drawing bullseyes on their own lips. You dip a rag in warm water, wipe mud off your boots, and listen as a German broadcast crackles through the wall, bragging about Ordnung and discipline. Everyone knows that discipline has a loophole shaped like a brothel door. You curl on a thin mattress, mind racing while body begs for sleep. Wind rattles the panes and somewhere a gramophone scratches out a waltz that used to fill ballrooms. Beneath the music, pounding footsteps echo down the stairwell, tattooing the rhythm of an invasion onto the bones of the building. You exhale slowly, counting heartbeats, wondering how you will navigate the days ahead when every path forks toward a different compromise of flesh or conscience. Rain returns, heavier now, drumming a lullaby against the roof. Your eyelids sag but refuse to close completely. In the half-light, you imagine tomorrow's dawn and the possibility that officials will come knocking, clipboard in hand, ready to draft bodies like yours into an industry that feeds on secrecy. Lightning flashes, and for a moment you glimpse your reflection in the window, tired eyes framed by resolve you did not know you possessed. Sleep overtakes you at last, uneasy and shallow. In the dream that follows, red paper lanterns float down the vistula like ghostly lilies, their candles sputtering each time a distant gun booms. You walk among them, collecting dead wicks and whispering names of women still awake in real beds, real fears coiling around them. Somewhere in that dream you promise to remember every face, even if official ledgers prefer blank lines. Morning will bring commandeered wagons, more rumours and choices that weigh the same as your own heartbeat. For now, though, you hover at the edge of consciousness, cradled by the rhythmic patter on roof tiles. The stove embers dim, the courtyard gate swings once more, and Warsaw waits with bated breath for an occupation that has already begun in spirit, if not in every headline. You slip through barbed wire strung between half-collapsed lampposts as dawn paints the eastern sky a bruised purple. Frost clings to ration card stubs fluttering on bulletin boards. Somewhere nearby a trumpet blasts reveille, a stiff note that cracks like a whip through silent streets. Your breath puffs in quick bursts while you skirt a sign stamped, "Licensed Morality Station, Authorized Personnel Only." Regulations roll off tongues in German and broken Polish. Every woman deemed of questionable reputation must register, carry an identity badge, and report weekly for sanitary inspections. By spring 1940, occupation authorities in Poland had formalized these systems across all occupied territories to control venereal disease and rally troop discipline. Officially, the measures are called morals police ordinances, but you reckon their true purpose smells more like profiteering than piety. You duck into a narrow alley to read a fresh poster listing penalties, 20 lashes or 3 weeks in confinement for unlicensed work. Registered women get coupons for extra soup portions, but lose any claim to privacy. Your fingertips brush chipped paint on the brick where someone has scrawled in charcoal polish words that translate as "no badge, no shame," a wink of rebellious chalk that feels like a secret handshake. Inside the registration office, you wait behind a line of women clutching notebooks filled with scraps of poetry, cigarette butts, and prayer requests. Each of you shivers in identical pea coats hand-me-down from a military depot, The clerk stamps forms with mechanical precision, her expression as brittle as the rationed bread. You hand over your name, age, and home address information that once would have felt personal, but now reads like barbed wire coordinates. Fact time. In France and Belgium, similar decrees went into force by June 1940, reshaping thousands of women's lives under uniformed oversight. A nurse steps forward to take your temperature, hovering a mercury thermometer under your tongue, as if probing for smuggled ivory. Behind her, a rack holds modest jumpsuits marked Comfort Station Staff. You edge away, heart thumping. Fringe Whisper has it some women sew hidden pockets into those uniforms to smuggle letters out to families. Historians still argue whether those pockets saved lives or simply fed victim narratives. You're handed a slim booklet stamped with official seals. Inside, curt instructions on curfew hours, client quotas, and acceptable contact procedures. Speak only German or English. One-line orders. You imagine muffled Polish slipping through thin walls, words like "bleib stark," "stay strong," that mean more than any formality ever could. You tuck the booklet into your coat, feeling its weight like a millstone. Outside, you wander past a quartet of soldiers, critiquing windows painted pastel for recreational facilities. You catch snatches of their banter. One complains the wallpaper pattern triggers memories of his aunt's parlour in Munich. You snort into your sleeve silent joke number 1, because you can almost picture him declaring floral prints a war crime. 4 blocks later, you reach the designated Comfort Station, a former schoolhouse with barred windows and a red cross above the archway. A steward in a bow tie greets you with overly bright courtesy. He offers a peppered biscuit and a cracked teacup filled with weak broth. You bite into the biscuit to hide your hesitation. Joke 2 drifts in your mind camp kitchen haute cuisine, now with extra grit. He flips through your booklet and leads you to a room lined with cots separated by thin curtains. You spot Anya's cameo from last night around the neck of a fellow woman, her hands folded over it like a lifeline. You share a nod that feels like signal code, no words, only solidarity. The steward reminds you gently that your first assignment starts at 6 p.m, and failure to report earns immediate suspension of soup coupons. Hunger and protocol make unlikely bedfellows. By afternoon, you absorb burnished sunlight through cracked panes, while a piano in the next hall tinkles out a Chopin nocturne. The steward claims the piano belonged to a local baron before the war. You pluck a sour note and try to imagine ghosts in silk gloves drifting through vaulted halls before it all turned to rubble. Quirky rumour says the Baron's ghost still critiques anyone who forgets to polish his floorboards. At 4, you muster through curtained doorways where lined-up uniforms hang like rows of scarecrows. You don one faded green frock, its collar riding your shoulders like an eager child. The fabric smells of mothballs and antiseptic. You press your badge, your new second skin, over your heart and clear your throat. The clock chimes 5 times. Drill sergeants of pleasure inch through corridors to inspect your appearance. They nod at clipped heels and zipped seams. You adjust your posture until ribs ache. A light joke number 3 surfaces, but you swallow it because every bit of strength counts. In this place, laughter can land you under solitary lights. Back in the common room, you sip tepid broth while reading the codebook. Maximum of 20 clients per night. Condoms distributed in sealed packets. No fraternization beyond coin exchange. Officially a measure against disease. Unofficially, it feels like inventory control of human bodies. Footsteps approach. A burly officer clicks his heels at attention. You stow the booklet just as he declares new orders. Random medical visits each hour. Fines for lax compliance, and 0 tolerance for refusal. You blink at the fine print and think of your mother's garden. You remember roses bending under summer storms but standing still. You tighten your jaw, acknowledging that compromise may claw at your dignity, but survival claws louder. Fact check. By late 1940, one Red Cross reports, note rising infection rates among troops despite these controls, prompting whispers that the system serves revenue streams more than health services. You rise and follow a line of women through winding hallways back to the courtyard, where lamplight struggles against encroaching fog. Lanterns hang from posts like glowing sentinels. You pause beneath one, fingertips grazing chipped paint, and trace a faded stencil, a floral wreath surrounding the words Sicherheit und Schutz, security and protection. Protection, you wonder. For whom? A wind passes carrying distant artillery thumps. You brace the lantern and step forward. Your night begins soon, trading conversation for coin, companionship for coupons. Each transaction cements the boundaries between flesh and finance, freedom and facade. Yet somewhere in each controlled breath you find resolve tiny sparks that no regulation can quell. You inhale the smoky air, tasting grit and resolve. Regulation may try to define your reflection in a booklet, but you hold still enough to rewrite every line with your own will. Shadows lengthen as the station doors creak open to receive the first patrol. You bend your neck to meet each silhouette, knowing you'll perform a dance scripted by laws you never consented to. Curfew bells will chime at midnight. Until then, you move through antiseptic halls, a ledger entry shaping history in hushed steps. Outside, Warsaw's skeleton of streets waits, the city's pulse thumping in sync with your own. In the hush before orders start, you fold your coat around you like armor and walk into the guard's lantern glow, stepping onto a path that balances survival on the razor's edge of morality. You step off the creaking wooden platform in a train station that smells of diesel and damp wool, your stomach twisting as you search for the promised waitress position. A slim man in an ill-fitting suit greets you with a grin that gleams under the flickering lanterns. He tucks a slim portfolio under his arm and offers you a cigarette from a crackling tin. You probably won't survive boredom in polite service. So you light the cigarette, inhale the acrid smoke, and nod as he launches into his pitch. He talks fast in a smooth voice, promising hot meals twice a day, steady wages in Reichsmarks, and a tidy room at the frontier outpost. He gestures toward a battered coach bus idling beside the platform. The windows blur with dust and rain. You catch the tail end of his brochure, esteemed hospitality roll, and serve officers and their guests. The words hang in the damp air like a trap waiting to snap shut. You cradle the tin cigarette box while he fills your ears with comfortable lies. Officially, recruiters for so-called hospitality services operated under civilian contracts in occupied regions by mid-1941 to meet troop demand for recreation. You tuck that fact behind your teeth. Mainstream histories record thousands tricked into signing papers in marketplace stalls and town halls. He hands you a contract printed in tiny Gothic script. The ink smudges under your finger. You scan clauses about 3 months commitment, no leave without approval, and strict confidentiality. A curious stipulation reads that you consent to random health screenings and lodging assignments dictated by military discretion. You frown and slide on a pair of gloves, feeling the paper's weight like a secret dossier. Outside, the station clock ticks off minutes in heavy strokes. Soldiers in muddy boots trudge past, staring at your gloves as if they hold clues. You roll the contract into a tube and tuck it inside your coat. Fringe whispers claim some women sewed hidden messages into gloves and handkerchiefs to warn each other about transfers. You crack a wry grin. Joke number 1. The recruiter presses a silk scarf into your hands while reciting the itinerary. You twirl the scarf and feel its smooth weave slip through your fingers. He tells you that frontier barracks feature a cultural program complete with folk dancing and live accordion nights. You imagine choreographed waltzes beneath tent flaps lit by kerosene lanterns. A light joke floats to your lips about Club Med meets camouflage. You bite your tongue before it escapes. You climb aboard the bus and find a seat next to a young woman clutching a suitcase plastered with travel stickers from Berlin and Munich. She smiles nervously and offers you a chocolate ration bar. You accept it gratefully, noting the wrapper's design of dancing soldiers. You snap off a square and taste sugar tinged with sawdust. Joke 2. The bus roars to life and rumbles out of town. crossing blasted fields and forests that whisper with far-off artillery. Every mile you feel the recruiter's friendly pat turn colder. He adjusts his tie and checks his pocket watch. At a checkpoint, you show your contract to a uniformed sentinel who stamps it without a glance. He tosses it back, and you feel its paper scar. The bus pulls into a muddy yard beside rows of canvas tents and wooden huts. Tents flap like wounded birds in the wind. You climb down, boots sinking into slush. The recruiter leads you past soldiers lounging on crates, their boots kicked off, laughing at a deck of cards. They eye you like you belong to their prize table. You swallow hard. In the center of the camp lies a building painted olive drab, a sign barely visible above the door reading, Buffet et Salon de Confort. The recruiter pats the doorframe and announces your arrival with enforced cheer. A guard in a trench coat nods and steps aside. Inside the room smells of boiled cabbage and disinfectant. A line of metal chairs clanks against the floor. You follow the recruiter to a makeshift office, where a lieutenant in polished boots inspects your papers. He eyes your gloves and scarf, his gaze lingering on the silk pattern. You force yourself to meet his stare. He stamps your contract again, sealing your fate. Official fact: by late 1941, the German High Command had established over 50 such comfort stations across occupied Europe and the Eastern Front. You swallow the last of your ration chocolate and feel the candy dissolve into anxiety. The lieutenant issues your identification badge, an oval disc on a black ribbon, then gestures toward a corridor lined with curtained alcoves. Your pulse thunders like distant bombs. You realize that waitress tasks include much more than serving coffee. In the corridor, a battered old radio crackles news in accented German. You catch a line about supply shortages and troop morale. Historians still argue whether the comfort stations aimed primarily to prevent illicit brothels, or simply to channel profits into military coffers. You glance at your reflection in a scratched mirror and hardly recognize the face peering back. A matronly woman with steel-rimmed glasses hands you a uniform. It is a faded green dress with a raised waistline and a collar that chafes your neck. The fabric smells of detergent and damp linen. You step into it and button your throat closed. Fringe rumours claim some uniforms were recycled from hospital wards to conceal the depth of exploitation. You tug at a stray thread and consider testing that theory later. The recruiter taps his watch and guides you toward a small lounge where a lone accordionist plays a mournful folk tune. He nods to the accordionist and whispers in his ear. The music shifts to a jaunty waltz, filling the lounge with a hollow cheer. You slide into a velvet-backed chair, and the accordionist tips his cap. You shift the scarf around your neck, feeling each stitch like a reminder of the choice you made. He brings you a cup of tepid broth and a crust of bread. The recruiter smiles and says, "Welcome to your new assignment." You lift the bread, its texture dense and grainy. You take a bite and taste more grit than grain. Joke 3. An officer steps in, clipboard in hand, and calls your name. You follow him through curtained doorways that open into a vast tent lit by strings of bare bulbs. Rows of cots line the walls, each bed bearing a folded blanket and a pillow stained faintly yellow. You measure the distance between cots, counting 7 paces. A bell rings overhead, vibrating through the canvas. The officer outlines your duties in clipped tones. Shift begins at 6, ends at midnight. You will greet officers and enlisted men separately. Meals are provided at fixed times. Medical checks occur upon arrival and departure. No leave without clearance. You nod, feeling each regulation pin prick your resolve. Outside the tent, you glimpse the recruiter slipping away with his portfolio. You think of the contract tucked in your coat and wonder what happens if you refuse another assignment. In theory, you could appeal, but appeals vanish into Wehrmacht bureaucracy as easily as footprints in snow. You exit the tent into a chill breeze that carries the scent of pine and distant gunfire. The frontier outpost feels like the edge of the world, a place where rules bend like light through broken glass. You tuck your badge under the scarf and inhale the cold air. A lone lantern swings from a nearby tree. its glow dancing across frozen ground. You pull your coat tight and step toward the barracks door. Your shadow stretches long and thin across the earth. In that moment, you understand that deception has many faces. Some wear friendly smiles and carry silk scarves. Others stand behind desks in olive drab. All of them shape the path you walk now. You lift your hand and knock on the barracks door, heart pounding in your throat. The door swings open before you finish the knock. Inside, the warm light spills out onto the frozen ground. You inhale that warmth and step over the threshold, leaving the chill and the lies behind, even as they follow close at your heels. You step into the dark belly of a freight train car that smells of coal dust and sweat as you join a crowd huddled on rough wooden benches. Night outside is a velvet curtain pierced by faint stars and distant shell bursts. Every breath feels borrowed against the next as you press closer to a nurse in a stained white apron. Her eyes flicker with worry while she hums an off-key lullaby under her breath. You grip her shoulder for balance when the car lurches forward, metal teeth grinding on rails like a hungry beast awakening. The carriage sways in long arcs that tug at your stomach. You share the bench with a dancer who clutches a tattered violin case. She tells you she once performed in a Parisian music hall before the war shuttered her stage. Her fingers drum a nervous rhythm on the case, while she murmurs about lost waltzes. A soldier in the corner sketches her profile in charcoal, his hands stained with graphite and gilt. You catch a flicker of recognition in his eyes when you meet his gaze. Joke 1 bubbles in your mind, but it withers before you can let it bloom. In the darkness, you sense shapes moving between the benches. A wiry man with a crooked moustache passes among passengers, slipping folded papers into coats and boots. He whispers urgent directions to cages of spies and couriers alike. Fringe rumour has it he is part of a secret network that smuggles intelligence from occupied zones back to London. You swallow hard while he offers you a slip of paper too quickly to read. You tuck it into your coat pocket without a glance. The train grinds on through forests that blur like watercolour strokes. You feel each tree pass as a soft thump against the car's side. Occasionally, lantern light spills through cracks, revealing faces lined with fatigue, faith, or fear. Behind you, a maid from a Normandy manor knits socks for soldiers' feet that will march toward frost and chaos. She pauses to offer you a stitch for luck. You tie the yarn to your wrist, its loop a silent vow to survive. Above you, the metal roof rattles with each jolt. You press a hand to your chest, feeling your heartbeat sink with the rails. The nurse leans over to share a crust of bread and a cup of tepid tea. You taste dryness and rue as you swallow. Fact time. You recall a military report from 1942, noting that troop transport trains often carried civilian workers and soldiers in the same cars to economize resources and maintain secrecy. Somewhere ahead, an explosion thunders like a clap of thunder tearing the sky. Shards of glass rain from a broken window pane, sprinkling the floor with sharp confetti. You flinch as the car shudders, then catch the nurse's hand in yours. She squeezes gently and offers a shaky smile that feels like a lifeline. You nod back, grateful for a human touch amid the industrial chaos. You shift to steady your legs when the carriage tilts sharply. A dancer stifles a laugh as she rights herself, her violin case thumping against the bench. You quip that at least the music will have a live audience, but the joke hangs in the cramped space, half heard and fading. Joke 2 drifts on the air like a loose thread begging to be tugged. A faint glow appears at the end of the car, where a single bulb flickers above a metal door. You stand and squeeze past a line of boots and skirts, your coat brushing against bodies pressed in every corner. A spy steps aside, nods, and whispers to keep quiet. Behind his eyes you glimpse secrets that could shatter empires. You want to ask his name, but words scramble in your throat. At the door you see soldiers offloading supplies in the dim light of a makeshift platform. Crates stamped with crosses hold medical gear and ration tins. Nearby wooden boxes mark out ammunition. A group of officers in leather jackets consults a map pinned to a wooden crate, their breath visible in the cold air. You peer through the gap and feel the hush of the front closing in. You slip back inside as the door clanks shut. The carriage rocks again, faster this time. You press your hands to the bench and let the momentum guide you toward a small window slit. Through it, you glimpse the faint glow of distant flares dancing across a field. You imagine trenches snaking through mud, soldiers huddled against the cold, waiting for sunrise or death, whichever comes first. The charcoal sketch soldier beside you catches your elbow and murmurs about designs he plans to smuggle home when this ends. He says he'll open a small studio and draw gentle portraits of children who never knew war was a word. You tuck the vision of that peaceful future into your mind like a seed. Historians still argue whether these artist-turned-soldier accounts were widespread acts of resistance or isolated footnotes lost in official records. You settle back among the passengers as the train roars on into the night's embrace. The nurse offers a whispered prayer for safe arrival. The dancer closes her eyes and breathes deep, perhaps dreaming of concert halls cleansed of shell-shock echoes. You rest your head against the wooden wall, shoulders loose for the first time since boarding. Above the lull of wheels you catch snatches of song drifting from the violin case. The dancer has coaxed a soft melody into being. It weaves through the crowd, knitting together nerves and hopes in fragile harmony. You close your eyes and let the notes cradle you. In that song you hear a promise that even steel rails and war machines cannot crush. Far ahead, the train's whistle blows a signal that sets hearts hammering. The carriage slows and a deep voice calls out orders in clipped tones. Lanterns bob at the windows as soldiers prepare for arrival. You straighten, smoothing your coat as if ironing out each wrinkle could press away fear. The door swings open onto a frozen platform where torches blaze against the cold air. Men in greatcoats march past in pairs, their breaths clouds that vanish instantly. You step off the train with the nurse and dancer at your side. Your boots crack on ice as you stride toward wooden huts lined up like troopers awaiting inspection. You inhale the sharp scent of pine and metal. A soldier hands out blankets and points you toward a heated tent. You share a quick look with the nurse before following a path lit by lanterns swaying in the wind. The dancer's violin case bumps your leg and you smile despite the frost biting at your cheeks. Inside the tent, heat shocks your senses. You shake off snow and look around at rows of bunks, each a promise of rest if only for a few hours. The nurse rubs her hands together and offers you a spot on a cot near the tent wall. You drop your coat and sit, feeling gravity ease its grip on your limbs. As the tent fills with whispers and muffled yawns, you realize you have crossed from rumor into reality. The frontier at last. Here your courage and your will be tested under a sky that knows no mercy. Yet in that heated tent you also feel a fragile kinship with strangers whose paths have converged on these rails of fate. Outside, a lone bugle echoes across the camp. You tuck your chin into your scarf and close your eyes. Tomorrow will demand every ounce of strength you have. For now, you lie back on the thin mattress and let the drone of voices and the steady hum of a distant engine rock you toward a restless sleep. You step through a low archway into a canvas pavilion, lit by rows of bare bulbs strung from taut ropes. The air smells of disinfectant and boiled cabbage, and your boots sink into a thin layer of sawdust scattered across the wooden floor. A uniformed orderly greets you with clipped courtesy and hands you a plain cotton smock to slip over your clothes. You feel the fabric scratch against your skin as you tie it at the back. Rows of cots line each side of the pavilion, their blankets folded with military precision. A table stands at the far end, piled with wrapped condoms and metal trays of medical instruments. Two doctors wearing steel-rimmed spectacles hover over a patient on an examination table. Their gloved hands move with methodical efficiency, checking notes and marking charts. Fact time. Military doctors in 1942 conducted routine health inspections in frontline brothels to curb the spread of venereal disease among troops. You wait your turn in a queue of women who look as weary as you feel. A nurse waves you forward and guides you to the examination table. You lie back as the doctor swabs your arm for blood samples, then probes for signs of infection with quick, practiced movements. The light from an overhead lamp glints off his metal instruments. You focus on a chipped poster showing a cartoon soldier flexing his bicep above the slogan, "Stay clean, stay strong." After the exam, you shuffle to the ration counter, where another orderly hands out a sealed packet containing 3 condoms. He cracks a joke about treating rubber like ammunition, quipping that you should aim carefully. A nervous laugh escapes you, joke one, and you tuck the packet into a pocket of your smock. A quirky whisper circulates that women sometimes trade extra condoms for chocolate from sympathetic soldiers. You wander into an adjacent room divided by thin curtains. Inside, small wooden tables and mismatched chairs circle a battered phonograph playing accordion music. A kettle simmers on a camp stove, filling the air with the scent of peppermint tea. You pour yourself a cup and let the warmth seep into your hands. A woman next to you cleans her fingernails with a chipped nail file and murmurs about starting a beauty trade school after the war ends. Historians still argue whether such makeshift social clubs provided real comfort or masked deeper desperation. A bell rings twice, signalling your assignment. You smooth your smock, take a deep breath, and follow a soldier down a narrow corridor lit by flickering lanterns. His boots echo on the wooden planks as he leads you to a curtained alcove. You slip behind the fabric and find a small table set with a tin of biscuits, a chipped mug, and a flickering lamp. You place your tea carefully beside the biscuits, the lamp's glow dancing across the rough-hewn walls. He steps inside, greeting you with a polite nod and a request for tea. You pour the hot liquid into his mug and set it on the table. He unwraps one biscuit, inspects its texture, then breaks a piece off and offers it to you. The biscuit tastes like sawdust and salt, but you accept the gesture. Joke 2 crosses your mind about avant-garde wartime cuisine, but you swallow it before it escapes. Conversation drifts easily at first. He asks about home, your family, and your favourite songs. You name a lullaby your grandmother used to sing, and his eyes soften for a moment. You realize tenderness can exist even in a place defined by contracts and quotas. He finishes his tea, signals the end of civility, and reaches for your hand. You steady yourself, recalling the inspection rules printed in your booklet. You rise from the table and follow him behind a second curtain into a dimly lit room with a makeshift bed. The mattress sags in the middle, springs creaking under weight. He helps you remove your smock, folding it neatly on a chair. You lie back as he adjusts the blanket over your legs. Your heart pounds, each beat echoing against taut nerves and the wooden floor. You hear muffled laughter from other alcoves and a distant clink of a spoon against a mug. The cracked walls seem to absorb every whisper and sigh. You focus on steadying your breath as he removes the condom from its wrapper with careful fingers. You feel its cool latex slide into place, and the world narrow to the rhythm of shared breaths. The minutes pass in a blur of sensation and quiet dialogue. He asks if you believe in fate, and you recall your grandmother's words about strength and survival. You answer softly that you believe in small mercies. The light from the lamp flickers and casts your shadow on the wall, elongated and wavering like doubt itself. You squeeze his hand, feeling a flicker of human connection in a place built on violence. Afterward, you dress in your smock and take back your packet of condoms, now one shorter. He leaves quietly, offering a curt nod of thanks. You fold the blanket, straighten the chair, and step out into the lantern-lit corridor. A nurse checks your wristband before you exit, scanning its number against a clipboard filled with client tallies. Each tally feels like a line scratched through your own story. You pass the inspection table on your way back and glance at the charts pinned above. They track infection rates and client counts, numbers that reduce human lives to statistics. You shiver as a breeze drifts through a gap in the tent wall. Outside, boots patter on wooden planks as the next shift begins. You return to the common room, where the phonograph now plays a hearty polka. A woman sips her tea and offers you a biscuit broken in half. You accept it, tired and grateful for the small kindness. Joke 3 rises unbidden about wartime snack breaks being the highlight of the day, and you let it slip as a soft chuckle. A medical orderly announces a break for all staff. You step outside into the chill evening air, drawing in the scent of pine and damp earth. Lanterns sway overhead, casting shadows that dance across the ground. You press your packet of condoms to your chest like a talisman, each rubber sheath a reminder of your own agency amid rigid regulations. You find a quiet corner and lean against the tent's canvas wall. You stare at the milky ribbon of stars overhead and wonder how many other women lie beneath similar skies. You imagine them clutching the same small comforts, a hot cup of tea, a broken biscuit, a borrowed smile. Beneath the glow of a single lantern, you trace the path of a falling star, offering a silent wish for endurance. The break ends and you straighten your smock, wiping sawdust from its hem. You step back inside, ready for the next assignment, knowing each transaction pushes you closer to tomorrow but further from who you were before. You inhale the scent of disinfectant and steel, resolve tightening in your chest like the pull of a bowstring. Clients wait beyond the curtain again, shadows shifting in expectant silence. You lift the fabric, breath held steady, and step forward once more into the pavilion's glow, prepared to carry another story embroidered with resilience and sorrow. You sigh as the sun dips low and the pavilion lanterns flicker awake, their pale bulbs casting a honeyed haze over the sawdust floor. A steward taps his boot impatiently and slides a metal clipboard across a small folding table. Your name sits at the top, followed by the number 20 circled in red ink. Tonight, the quota is 20 clients. No exceptions. You cradle the clipboard, its weight pressing a question into your palm. Fatigue or failure? You slip into your smock and inspect your reflection in a warped mirror propped against a tent pole. Your hair is pinned tight, cheeks flushed from the day's heat, and your eyes glint with determination. You brush a loose strand behind your ear, practicing a smile that carries mustard seed warmth without spilling over. Joke 1 surfaces. You consider calling it the world's most exhausting waiting list, but you tuck the thought away before it blooms. The steward announces the first patrol group, and you step forward into a corridor lined with curtained alcoves. Each alcove holds a tidy bed, a lamp, and a small table where tins of biscuits and chipped mugs stand ready. You open the curtain to find your first visitor, a lieutenant with a nervous stutter who keeps glancing at the clock. He offers you a limp biscuit and apologizes for its crumbly constitution. You bite into it, tasting the grit of frontier life. You settle him on the bed and pour tea into his mug. He asks about your day and you deflect with a light joke about cocktail hours in military chic. He chuckles, surprised by your humour, then leans forward to press a coin into your palm, his cheeks warming. A tactile cue marks one down, 19 to go. You tidy the alcove and move to the next curtain, glancing at the steward's clock on the wall. Time drips like sand in an upturned hourglass. You take a deep breath as a corporal strides in, his gait crisp beneath his coat. He thumbs through his gloves and remarks that quotas must be easier if you charge by the hour. You quip that some nights you wish you could charge by the minute. He laughs, and you note the first tally scratched into the ledger. In the break room, a nurse restocks tea kettles and murmurs that frontline brothels in 1943 standardized quotas at 20 clients per evening to maintain troop morale and justify staffing levels. Fact time. Records from the German High Command show comfort stations were expected to meet these quotas or face budget cuts. You nod and lift a fresh packet of condoms from the shelf. A quirky rumour drifts in through the canvas seam that some women kept tiny notebooks, disguised as recipe books, to track each client's preferences and nicknames. You imagine a stew of soldier stories simmering in coded recipes. Historians still argue whether these personal logs offered emotional refuge or merely catalogued exploitation. You return to the corridor, counting your steps 7 paces between each alcove. You tuck your smock behind your belt, smoothing fabric that trembles like a captured flag. The next visitor is a fatigued private who apologizes for falling asleep mid-session once before. You laugh softly and reassure him that nodding off counts as moral support. Joke 2 flutters out, quiet and comforting. You guide him to the cot and settle beside him, asking lightly if he prefers peppermint or chamomile tea afterward. He chooses peppermint, and you fetch 2 mugs, handing him one and sipping from yours. Steam curls between you as you share a fleeting moment of normalcy amid the orchestrated intimacy. Noon's heat gives way to evening chill. You step outside the pavilion to drop off used cups and exchange them for fresh ones. Lanterns glow like fallen stars as you breathe in pine-scorched air. Somewhere, a gramophone scratches out a polka that floats across the camp. You smile at the absurdity of a dance tune marking someone else's tired steps. Back inside, a sergeant waits by your alcove door with an impatient tap. He compliments your steady hand and asks if quotas ever scare you. You meet his gaze and answer softly that fear and resolve often share a cot, but resolve tends to outlast dawn. He offers you a chocolate bar in thanks for honesty, and you unwrap it with gratitude. You hide that chocolate for later, a small rebellion. As the night drifts on and the tally edges toward 15, exhaustion comes calling. You feel it in your shoulders, in the tremor at your fingertips, in each inhale that tastes of cigar, smoke, and antiseptic. You press a hand to your heart, steadying a pulse that thrums with obligation. The steward signals a surprise inspection. A doctor steps in, clipboard in hand, and scans the corridor with a clinical eye. He checks wristbands and counsel slips of paper. You hold your breath while he pauses at your alcove, then nods and moves on. You exhale, pressing your back against the cool canvas wall. You count again. 18 down, 2 to go. Your voice echoes in the hush as you call for tea refills. You serve with practiced grace, pouring from the kettle until the last drop murmurs into the mug. The final clients appear, a captain and a first lieutenant who joke that they are racing to break a record. You grin and tease that they might need extension cords for that kind of stamina. Joke 3 slips into the air like a wink. They settle on the bed together, muttering about double shifts and hazard pay. You tuck them in blankets and step away, flipping the steward's clipboard closed. You return to the ledger and watch him inscribe the final tally. 20. Quota met. The steward offers you a curt nod and a paper slip for a break. 15 minutes in the privacy tent. You slide behind the flap and sink onto a wooden crate. Your knees ache and your mind hums with the night's rhythm. You unwrap the hidden chocolate bar and hold it between your palms, its warmth seeping in. Outside the tent, a flute plays a soft lullaby, notes drifting through canvas like smoke rings. You close your eyes and taste the chocolate. Each crumb dissolves into memory, a breadcrumb trail leading back to who you were before quotas. You imagine the nurse, the dancer, the spy on the train. You stitch their faces into a mental quilt for comfort. 15 minutes ends with a tug at the flap. You rise, chest lighter now, and retie your smock. You press the paper slip into your pocket and step into the corridor. Lantern light flares on your face, revealing eyes that hold storm clouds and sunflower seeds of hope. You slip through each alcove, greeting soldiers with a nod. Some glance at you with gratitude, others with hollow relief. You guide them gently, reciting rules you know by heart. Routines etched into muscle memory. At midnight, the steward swings, the pavilion doors open, and announces lights out. A hush falls as blankets rustle and snores lift off like birds in flight. You gather your smock and gloves, folding them neatly on a small stool. You pocket the clipboard under your arm and step into the cool night. You walk back toward the common tent, boots crunching on frosted ground. Lanterns line the path, their glow soft and forgiving. You breathe deeply, tasting pine and possibility. Behind you, the pavilion door groans shut, sealing away quotas and confidences until tomorrow. You pause beneath a lantern and tilt your head, letting its light warm your face. You close your eyes and listen to the night's lullaby. Distant artillery, the hum of engines, a lone flute's tender refrain. In that chorus, you find a fragile harmony between service and self. You resume your steps, knowing tomorrow will demand the same tally of bodies and breaths. Yet tonight you carry a small victory. 20 names met, 20 small mercies offered, and one steward's nod that you survived the quota's edge. You emerge from the lantern-lit path into a clearing where wooden benches ring a fire pit, crackling with pine needles. The camp's common tent stands open, its flaps tied back to reveal rows of tables and folding chairs. Soldiers lounge in pairs, passing parcels wrapped in newsprint. You step inside and feel a warmth beyond the fire, an exchange of small treasures that speak louder than orders. A private waves you over, his grin crooked under a smudge of coal dust. He unfolds a piece of waxed paper to reveal a slab of chocolate scored into neat squares. He offers you half, his eyes bright with generosity. You break off a piece and let it melt on your tongue, the sweetness defying the drab canvas walls around you. He jokes that this tastes better than any emergency ration. You laugh softly. Joke one, because it's true. Across the table, a corporal unwraps a bar of scented soap, cracked with initials carved by a bored soldier back home. He explains that some men pack luxury items in care packages to trade for company more tender than a combat briefing. You sniff the soap's lavender scent and feel a flicker of calm curl through your chest. You settle onto a bench beside a sergeant who flips through a battered magazine filled with glossy pin-ups and Hollywood gossip. She passes it to you, pointing out stories of Clark Gable's latest war bond tour and Rita Hayworth signing autographs for enlisted men. You skim an article about film crews embedding with combat units for authenticity. History reports that in 1944 Hollywood studios coordinated with military censors to produce morale-boosting newsreels shown at frontline rest centers. Fact time. You trace a gossip column claiming that a certain starlet once smuggled letters to soldiers in her suitcase seams. Fringe whisper has it some actresses sent silk stockings as secret tokens of affection. You tuck that image into your mind, a swirl of celluloid glamour in muddy boots. Scholars still argue whether these celebrity gestures truly lifted spirits or served mostly as propaganda. A flicker of movement catches your eye. A GI sets down a tin of sardines and pulls out a small, hand-stitched pillow embroidered with a cartoon bulldog in an aviator's helmet. He tells you the pillow was a gift from a seamstress in Manchester who spent evenings stitching pockets into each corner to hold letters from loved ones. You hold the pillow and feel its rough fabric, each stitch a silent heartbeat connecting battlefront to home front. At a nearby table, you spot a crate of fresh oranges guarded like gold bars. A supply sergeant rations them 3 per man, promising the vitamin C will ward off scurvy and lift faltering morale. You reach for one and bite into its citrus tang, juice dribbling down your chin. Joke 2 surfaces you consider offering a wedge to the nearest field medic in exchange for a loosened regulation, but you tuck it away. The fire crackles hotter as night deepens. You watch orange peels curl into white ash. A young lieutenant passes around a stack of handwritten letters bound with string. He explains that a local teacher risked her safety delivering them under curfew. You take a letter pressed between 2 sheets, smudged ink spilling into folded creases, and wonder about the hands that wrote it. Historians still argue whether these clandestine mail routes ever reached more than a fraction of troops. But here in your hand, each word feels real. You lean back and let the fire's glow warm your face. A GI produces a harmonica and begins to play a wistful tune that drifts across the clearing. You close your eyes and let the melody wrap around you. The soap's lavender scent mingles with pine smoke, and you imagine yourselves attending a dance in some distant town square where laughter battles fear. When the harmonica falls silent, you notice a small tin of homemade fudge offered by a corporal in the next row. He says his sister whipped it up using condensed milk from a ration truck. You accept a cube and feel its sticky richness melt against your teeth. You joke that this is the only dessert in Europe worth risking a ration ticket for. Joke 3, but no one calls staff duty on humour tonight. You rise and cross to a table draped with a faded American flag where a lieutenant collects traded items. He tallies each gift with a careful nod and stores them in a wooden chest lined with felt. He explains that commanders encourage these exchanges as informal morale centers, a practice that became widespread by 1943 under Red Cross guidelines aiming to boost troop welfare. Official fact: you slide your pillow and letters into a burlap sack for safekeeping. The lieutenant thanks you and gestures toward a second chest labeled Personal Effects. You watch a soldier place a locket containing a black and white photo of a loved one inside. You feel the chest's lid thud closed and think about the weight of memories sealed within. Outside the tent, you find a canvas chair under starlight. You sit and unwrap a square of chocolate saved from earlier. Moonlight shimmers on its glossy surface. You inhale the night air, tasting pine and promise. You trace the knife edge of the camp's routine exhaustion tempered by these tiny rituals. A low voice breaks the hush. A medic approaches, offering you a bar of mint soap carved into a rose. She says it came from a Parisian tailor who slipped it through a checkpoint. You take the soap and press its petals between your fingers. You imagine petals unfurling in a hidden pocket and thriving despite the frost. A quirky echo of life persisting under austerity. You tuck the soap and chocolate into your coat and rise, shoulders squared beneath the canvas sky. You look back at the fire's embers, now grey and cooling, and feel a quiet satisfaction in this night's exchanges. Soldiers drift back to their posts with pillows and soap slung over rifles, a silent parade of comforts escorting them through darkness. Walking toward the medical tent, you pass rows of folding chairs left empty. Each one held a moment of solace, a chocolate square, a letter, a whiff of lavender that bridged the gap between orders and humanity. You pause at the tent's entrance and press your palm against its canvas wall. Beyond this fabric barrier lie the scent of antiseptics and the hum of stretched bandages, a world of wounds made visible. You step inside and let the door flap fall behind you, carrying with you the embers of tonight's small mercies. In the soft glow of a single lamp, you set down your pillow and letters on a cot reserved for special comforts. You unpack the gifts, arranging them like a shrine to hope and reprieve. A nurse enters, her light steps silent on canvas, and offers a nod of understanding. You settle onto a stool and pull the embroidered pillow into your lap. Its fabric is rough but familiar, the bulldog's grin oddly comforting. You press the pillow to your chest and lean back, listening to distant clinks of mess kits and the steady hum of generators. Outside the medical tent, the winds howl across frozen fields, carrying the scent of pine and distant artillery. Inside, you cradle these tokens from home, each a reminder that even amid war's darkest corners, small acts of kindness glow bright. You close your eyes and let each flavor, fragrance, and note linger on your senses. Tomorrow will demand courage anew, but tonight you rest in the company of exchanged gifts and quiet solidarity. The world beyond these tents may roar with conflict, yet here you claim a moment of calm, a testament to resilience carried in chocolate wrappers and hand-stitched stitches. You step through a heavy canvas flap into a glowering brick building marked with a single barred window. The air inside tastes metallic, as if iron filings swirl in every breath. Fluorescent bulbs hum overhead, their glare cutting through haze like scalpels. You follow a clipboard wielding orderly down a corridor, lined with steel doors, each stamped with numbers that echo like dismissive footfalls. In a vast room beyond, gleaming tables stretch in regimented rows, littered with vials, scalpels, and glass beakers. A stern-faced doctor in a crisp white coat adjusts his spectacles and motions you forward. He carries a syringe the size of a small dagger, its needle glinting under the light. You probably won't survive a wrong move, so you swallow your nerves and step closer. Fact time. During World War II, Nazi physicians in camps such as Ravensbrück conducted medical experiments on venereal diseases, injecting unwitting prisoners to study infection progression and test treatments. You sit on a cold metal stool as another nurse swabs your arm with iodine. Your skin tingles where the disinfectant seeps in. The doctor snaps open a vial labelled Syphilis Strain A and loads the syringe. You glance at the orderly's blank face, and realize no one here trades in empathy. Fringe whispers say some doctors tasted the pus from infected wounds to judge disease stages by flavor, a practice that lingers in rumor like a ghost story told in hushed corridors. He approaches with precise steps. You can almost hear your heartbeat ricochet off tiled walls. He narrows his eyes and says, "Relax. We are advancing science." Those words swirl around you, unwanted as a rainstorm in summer. You press your palms against your thighs, wishing you could heat them with a match. You steady your breath as the needle moves toward your flesh. A sharp pinch blooms into fire that races through your veins, marking you with an unwanted certainty. You blink past tears and try not to imagine the invisible army of microbes now forging a battlefield inside you. A nurse gives you a glass of water, her lips twitching in a ghost of a smile. You swallow, tasting chlorine. Joke one forms in your mind. Maybe next time they'll offer flavoured saline, but you tuck it away before it can escape. In the next bay, you watch another woman receive an injection, her eyes flicking towards you as if seeking shared strength. You catch her gaze and nod. No words are needed. You shift on the stool, bones creaking under tension, and force your mind towards steadier ground. Beyond the rows of tables, a low hum vibrates through the concrete floor. You follow it into an adjoining chamber, where electric lamps hang above a long bench crowded with glass flasks. Beakers bubble with neon-coloured liquids, and a chalkboard scrawled with equations towers behind a lectern. A young researcher jots notes in a leather journal, lips moving as he reads data off a machine. You edge closer to read the scrawled numbers. They map infection rates against treatment doses of salvarsan, the arsenic-based drug used before penicillin became widespread. A mainstream record notes that by 1943, German camps struggled with penicillin shortages and reverted to earlier remedies despite high toxicity. Historians still argue whether those toxic treatments prolonged lives or hastened fatalities under the guise of experimentation. A vial shatters at your feet, spraying shards across the tile. You step back, heels clicking, and nearly trip over a tray of medical charts. A lab assistant scurries forward, sweeping glass under a dustpan as if the fragments could vanish with a single gesture. You offer a nervy laugh joke too about broken glass being the camp's finest confetti. No one joins you. A guard shoves you down a narrow hallway toward an observation room. Inside, two doctors peer through a thick glass pane at a woman strapped to a gurney. Electrodes dot her limbs, wires feeding into a control box. The lead doctor adjusts a dial, and a faint electric crackle fills the air. You hold your breath while the woman's body twitches, eyes clamped shut against pain. You taste bile rising, and you turn away. In a dim corner, you spot a small wooden box filled with correspondence. It contains letters from families pleading for information about missing daughters. The doctors treat the box like trash, tossing letters into a fire pit spewing orange sparks. You catch a glimpse of smudged ink and vow that every word lost here will find a voice elsewhere someday. A door creaks, and a nurse ushers you back to the primary ward. Your arm throbs with both physical ache and a deeper memory of violation. You rub the spot where the needle entered, fingers tracing a bruise that blooms like nightshade. A quirky rumour drifts through your mind. Some inmates believe that drinking frog's blood could neutralise infection, a tale passed in secret to mock the experiments themselves. You imagine a chorus of ribbits in the lab echoing your silent protest. At a small desk, you receive a drab certificate proclaiming you unaffected by Trial A and eligible for reassignment. You take the paper and fold it twice, then twice more, as if compaction could make the words lighter. The nurse stamps it with a date and a location for your next evaluation. You tuck it into your coat pocket, next to your resolve. You follow a corridor of peeling paint and exposed pipes, each step stirring dust and memory. You cross a room where rows of bottles labelled Gonococcus culture line shelves like trophies. You pause and trace a finger along the dusty glass. No triumph dwells here, only the echo of stolen dignity. A doctor glances up and frowns you, break contact and step away. Outside the building, dusk bleeds violet across the sky. You shake out your arms and roll your shoulders, welcoming the ache as proof you are still human. A breeze stirs fallen leaves at your feet. You pick one up, its edges crisp and dry, and tuck it between the pages of your journal later, a silent memento of survival. In the distance, a whistle calls workers back to barracks. You join the line of women heading for evening roll call, their footsteps a steady percussion against cracked pavement. A light drizzle begins, tapping on your coat like a hesitant applause. You tilt your face upward and let droplets trace paths down your cheeks. Joke 3 edges forward, maybe you'll patent rainwater therapy next, but you smile instead at its absurdity. As you cross the yard, barrack lights flick on one by one, revealing silhouettes moving behind frosted panes. You feel the weight of your witnessed truths settle in your chest, heavy as concrete walls. You clutch your coat and press forward, carrying both the bruise on your arm and an ember of defiance. Tonight the labs sleep under lock and key, their secrets sealed until curiosity or reckoning demands the doors reopen. You walk past that heavy brick building one last time, its barred window dark and unseeing. You inhale the cool air and let the hush of night cradle your thoughts. In every silent heartbeat you vow to remember each procedure, each whisper, each stolen breath, until the world listens. You climb down from a lorry into a liberated French town, where bunting fashioned from bedsheets flutters above cobblestones slick with spring rain. Soldiers in boots mud-spattered as battle flags crowd around wooden huts painted pastel green and white. A canvas sign reads, "Recreation Centre," but you know the real purpose lies just beyond the curtained entrance. You inhale the scent of brewed coffee and distant gun oil, wondering how quickly freedom morphs into something else. You push through a flap into a hall warmed by a kerosene heater. Rows of folding chairs face a makeshift stage where a gramophone spins wartime tunes. Nurses in Red Cross armbands hand out mugs of cocoa laced with sugar saved from rations. Fact time. By mid-1944, Allied forces had established hundreds of Red Cross and YMCA huts across liberated Europe to provide both recreation and regulated comfort services for troops under strict supervision. You wander past a table stacked with freshly laundered towels and a rack of donated lingerie repurposed as uniforms. An orderly passes you a leaflet stamped Code of Conduct, ordering women to register and wear coloured sashes indicating health status. You slip the leaflet into your coat pocket, its edges crisp like a dossier you never asked for. A private approaches you with a grin as wide as his bayonet scabbard. He holds out a bar of mint soap pressed into the shape of an anchor. He jokes that it doubles as ammunition in a pinch. Joke 1 surfaces. Perhaps soap grenades will be next military innovation. But you nod and tuck the soap into your pocket. You step outside into a courtyard, ringed by low brick buildings. A line of women stands beneath a canopy, each clutching a tin cup and stamped ration card. You join the queue, noting their faces are young, scarred, and determined. A fringe whisper claims some comfort women here are former entertainers tricked by promises of stage roles. You tilt your head, tasting the irony as you wait. Inside a small office, a clerk checks your ration card, catalogues your name, and hands you a red sash embroidered with a white cross. You slip it over your shoulder and feel its weight like an unwanted medal. Historians still argue whether these registration systems protected women from violence or simply formalized another form of exploitation under the guise of health measures. You follow a nurse along a corridor of curtained alcoves, each lit by a single bare bulb dangling from a nail. The nurse taps gently on your arm and nods toward an alcove where a corporal waits. He offers you a bruised rose picked from a garden behind the town hall. You accept it with a half smile, pressing petals between your fingers as if you can trap beauty before it wilts. He escorts you to a chair by a warming stove and pours you a cup of tea. Steam curls around your face like a whispered promise. You offer him a biscuit, its edges soft from steam, and he bites into it with a snap that echoes in the quiet. You joke that it tastes like hope kneaded with flour. Joke 2 dances on your tongue before you tuck it away. Outside, you spot a makeshift barber's stand where tattered flags serve as curtains. A barber whittles soap into ornate shapes while trimming soldiers' hair. Word is he sculpts soap into miniature helmets and bayonets to entertain men nervous about the next advance. You file that detail under quirky tidbit and let a ghost of a grin curve your lips. Back in the corridor, the corporal's glance lingers on your sash. He lifts it, runs a fingertip along the embroidered cross, and murmurs, "This means safety." You nod, though safety here tastes like chalk. He places the rose in a vase on the table and extends his hand. You follow him through a second curtain into a larger hall where chairs are arranged around low tables. A jukebox in the corner crackles to life with a swing tune recorded before the war. Soldiers snap their fingers and tap boots to the beat, filling the hall with restless energy. You take a seat by a window and watch rain spatter the pane like broken promises. The corporal joins you with 2 mugs of cocoa. He raises his mug in a quiet toast to survival. You clink yours against his and sip. The cocoa is thick, sweet, and tinted with exhaustion. You both sit in companionable silence, listening to laughter drifting from another corner where a card game is underway. He places a peppermint soap rose on the table next to your mug. You trace its carved petals and find comfort in its permanence. He leans back and says, "These centers keep men alive, but what about us?" You meet his gaze and nod. Sometimes compassion feels like a rationed commodity. You rise as a nurse signals the next assignment. She guides you down a ramp behind the hall into a lantern-lit annex. In the dim interior, you see beds lined in neat rows, each outfitted with a thin mattress and a wool blanket. A warming lamp glows at the foot of each cot. You choose one by the far wall, noting a small lacquered table beside it holds a vase of dried lavender. The nurse hands you a packet containing 2 condoms and a slip of paper with room etiquette. No loud noises, no leave past curfew, and always report illness immediately. You tuck the packet into your coat, feeling each latex liner like a fragile shield. You lie back on the cot and close your eyes. The lavender scent drifts over you, soft as a lullaby. You recall pianos in other zones, laughter in French chateaux, and syrupy American jazz on crackling recordings. You wonder if hospitality really means care or if it simply repackages longing into controlled compartments. A faint melody drifts through the wall, someone humming a tune from home. You focus on the notes and let them drift you beyond barbed wire and ration cards. Behind the humming you hear distant artillery roll like thunder far off at sea. You inhale, chest rising with tension and release. A sergeant steps into your room to check the lighting. His clipboard bears a list of names, each crossed off as inspections proceed. He smiles politely and says, "Your sash looks crisp." You nod and ask if he ever doubts this work. He blinks, scans your face, and replies, "Sometimes the only choice is to keep moving." You study the flicker of the lamp and feel its warmth seep into your bones. You imagine your own hands knitting lace in a different life, or scrawling stories in a notebook by candlelight. You tuck those images deep as you slip out of the cot and fold your sash with care. In the hallway you pass a group of women seated on barrels, sharing whispered jokes in broken English. One offers you a cigarette rolled in an old newspaper. You accept it gratefully, its smouldering end a tiny rebellion. You inhale the smoke and let it mingle with the lavender scent lingering on your skin. Back in the recreation hall, the jukebox switches to a slow ballad. Soldiers stand in pairs, swaying awkwardly on scuffed boards. You watch them and think of your own steps, measured, cautious, wanting to follow the rhythm but unsure of the choreography. As the music plays, you walk to a small stage and run a hand across its polished surface. A mic stands lonely at center stage, its cable coiled like a snake waiting to strike. You mount the stage on a whim, heart pounding, and lean into the mic. Your voice emerges in a soft murmur, a lullaby your grandmother sang. The hall stills. Soldiers turn at the melody, their heads tilting as if hearing home for the first time in months. You sing in a second-person whisper, each note meant as balm. Safe in these walls, safe in these arms, sleep soft tonight. When you finish, applause rolls out in hesitant waves. You step down, cheeks warm, and return to your cot under drifting lavender and the hum of electric bulbs. Here, in this Allied-run sanctuary, you hold both comfort and compromise in your hands. Outside the windows, rain blurs distant ruins into watercolour. Inside, a fragile community blooms under patchwork care. Tonight you rest between two worlds, one marked by conflict, the other by small kindnesses enacted under moral camouflage. You close your eyes and let the lullaby linger. Tomorrow will bring quotas of another kind, lessons in loss and resilience. For now, you surrender to the hush, where lavender, cocoa, and song weave a temporary promise of peace. You slip through a narrow back entrance of the makeshift brothel, the lantern above the door casting wavering light on chipped paint and a faded red cross. Inside, the hush is heavier than any curfew bell, broken only by muffled laughter and the clink of teacups. You cradle a folded scrap of paper against your chest, its edges brittle like a secret waiting to crack open. In the common room, women arrange roses in tin cans and toast low-burning candles to mask the scent of disinfectant. A nurse, at a corner table, chats with a corporal about the latest shipment of tea. You take your cue, slide behind a battered mattress propped against the wall, and slip the folded note beneath its steel springs. Joke once surfaces in your mind, you consider calling it mattress mail, but you tuck the thought away before it shatters the tension. Fact Time, a veteran courier, once noted that by 1943, the Polish Home Army recruited women working in uniformed brothels to carry messages hidden in buttons, boots, and bed frames to bypass German checkpoints. You inch back to the door and duck out into the alley. The night air tastes of damp cobblestones and burning pine torches from a nearby guard post. A stray cat weaves between your ankles, its fur mottled like battle scars. You scold it softly for nearly tripping you. Joke too, blooming apparently even feline resistance fighters deserve to be called to order. You cross a deserted courtyard toward a row of bombed-out warehouses. On the far side, a partisan contact waits by a stack of wooden crates painted with camouflage stripes. He nods when you approach, hands tucked inside a wool coat. You offer a slight bow and press your palm to your heart in greeting. He extends a flask filled with Assat's coffee that tastes like charred hopes and sugar. You accept a sip, savouring the bitter comfort. In a gravel-strewn corner, you retrieve the message by lifting the mattress's corner with a practiced fingertip. Inside the tiny fold of paper, ink lines curve into ciphered words. You stow it in your coat pocket and examine the note the partisan hands you in return. It's a thin strip of fabric, embroidered with numbers that twirl like barbed wire. Fringe Whisper says those stitches map enemy supply routes, a textile map meant to be burned before dawn. He tilts his head and murmurs instructions. Deliver this to a safe house beneath the church steeple by first light. You nod, and he presses a coin into your palm, an unspoken pledge of gratitude. His eyes glint with moonlight and fierce resolve. You slip away under slanted beams of searchlight, heart-drumming a beat meant for battle drums. The note's texture feels warm through your coat. You imagine German patrols tramping these same streets moments ago, unaware that intelligence danced in shadows just beyond their rifles' reach. A breeze rattles a shutter above you, sounding like a distant cannon shot. You pause and glance up at shattered windows where paper streamers hang like ghostly bookmarks in ruined libraries. You steady yourself, practicing a smile for whatever guard you'll meet next. In the next block, a soldier back from leave stands guard outside a cafe turned billet. His helmet is tipped low, hiding his eyes. You step toward him and offer a polite, "Guten Abend." He nods and says curtly that you may pass. Apparently your rhythm matches the curfew code. You slip by, bending into the hush of a narrow lane. Beyond the cafe, you find a hollowed church whose nave is flooded with lantern light. Shadows of arched windows dance across rubble-strewn pews. You climb through the broken door, careful not to tread on strewn hymnals soaked by rain. In the apse, a charcoal sketch on a brick pillar marks a hidden door, a rectangle about knee-high, outlined in faded chalk. You press your palm against the brick and trace its shape, the chalk crisp under your fingers. You kneel and press the embroidered strip against a latch concealed behind a loose stone. It clicks open like a whispered secret. Inside, the warmth of candlelight and the smell of damp earth greet you. A narrow stair spirals downward. You descend, each step echoing like a question. Joke 3 winks at you. Apparently, secret passages come with their own dramatic sound effects. At the bottom, you emerge into a vaulted cellar lined with cloaked figures bent over maps and radios. A wireless operator in oil-stained overalls hands you 2 slender envelopes. He flicks a switch, and the radio crackles to life with Morse code. A distant conversation between London and Warsaw. He says those codes guide supply drops behind enemy lines. You whisper thanks and slip the envelopes inside your coat, marvelling at their slender weight. A woman in threadbare trousers and a muddy shawl leans forward to inspect your coat collars. "Safe?" she asks in a low voice. You touch the edge of your scarf. Its faint floral pattern, a hidden password. She nods and steps aside, revealing a table piled with brooches. Each brooch hides a microfilm capsule containing lists of collaborators. Fringe rumour insists some women sold fake brooches to flush out double agents. You smooth your coat and glide past the table into a narrow corridor lined with clay pots. Each pot holds a rolled candle used to transmit signals by moonlight to Allied aircraft. You pick up a candle and feel its waxy cylinder slip warm between your fingers. A partisan engineer explains that candles work as semaphore flashes spell names of drop zones. Historians still argue whether candle signals or radio messages saved more lives. You tuck the candle into your pocket and climb back up the spiral stairs. Outside the church, dawn tiptoes through stained glass shards, painting the courtyard in bruised colours. You breathe deeply and wipe dew from your coat sleeve. The lorry that brought you here waits around the corner. You hurry toward it, past shattered stalls and a lone accordionist who plays a hesitant tune. You toss him a coin and he nods, his lips curling around a grin. You imagine his tune echoing across fields of resistance as you climb aboard the flatbed. The driver rumbles forward, tires crunching gravel like gentle applause. You press your packages against your chest and stare at the church steeple receding in the mist. Beneath its height, someone sleeps unaware of the network threading beneath his town. You close your eyes and let the movement lull your thoughts. Each message you carry is a spark tossed into darkness. Each delivery fuels sabotage, rescue, and hope. In that quiet hum of wheels on stone, you feel the pulse of resistance beating through your veins. You step onto a dusty road under a blistering sun, the air thick with the scent of diesel and overripe fruit. Trucks painted army green grind past in a haze, their canvas covers hiding human cargo. Alongside the road, a small knot of girls waits nervously, their shadows drawn tight against their feet. A sergeant in a khaki uniform checks names against a clipboard, calling each in turn with the voice of someone ticking boxes rather than summoning lives. A young woman, in a plain cotton dress, shifts from foot to foot, clutching a satchel that seems far too light for a journey. Her name is shouted next. She steps forward, eyes fixed on the ground. You follow her gaze to a set of rough wooden steps leading up into the back of a waiting truck. She climbs in without hesitation, disappearing into the dim space beyond the flap. Fact time. Beginning in the late 1932nd, Japanese imperial forces organized a widespread system of comfort stations across occupied Asia, forcibly recruiting tens of thousands of women from Korea, China, the Philippines, and beyond. Many were told they would work in restaurants or factories, only to find themselves imprisoned in garrison brothels. The sergeant gestures for you to board the truck. Inside, The air is hot and close, smelling of dried sweat and straw mats. Wooden benches line each side, already filled with silent passengers, most barely out of their teens. You sit near the back beside a girl holding a paper fan decorated with painted cranes. She opens it with a snap and begins fanning herself slowly, the gesture oddly regal in the cramped quarters. One of the older women offers you a canteen. The water tastes faintly of tin and salt. She says she came from a fishing village and had been promised work in a textile mill. Instead, she ended up in a barracks where soldiers queued at her door from sunrise until midnight. Her words fall like stones into the silence. The truck lurches forward. Outside, the countryside slides by in flashes, rice paddies gleaming in the sun, children waving from a dirt path, laundry snapping on bamboo poles. A low murmur begins among the women as they compare stories of recruitment, a friend who arranged travel, a government official promising steady pay, an aunt who insisted it would be safer in the city. You note the common thread. Each trusted someone they knew. At a checkpoint, armed guards in field caps wave the convoy through. One pauses to hand a soldier on the tailgate a folded note. The soldier tucks it into his shirt pocket without reading it. You catch a glimpse of the handwriting, tiny and neat. A message folded so small it could be hidden under a fingernail. Fringe Whisper says, sympathetic civilians sometimes smuggle warnings or escape routes inside cigarette packs or letters disguised as receipts. The road narrows into a winding track through thick jungle. Bamboo thickets scrape the truck's sides, and the smell of damp earth drifts in. The girl with the paper fan hums a folk song, soft enough to blend with the rumble of the engine. The melody coils around you like a rope of shared memory. Joke one rises in your mind about charging admission for this impromptu concert, but you keep it to yourself. The truck finally jolts to a stop inside a compound ringed with barbed wire. A wooden gate creaks open to reveal low buildings with tin roofs. Soldiers lounge in the shade, smoking and laughing. A commanding officer strides forward, his boots crunching on gravel. He orders everyone to disembark and line up. In the main hall, a clerk seated at a desk records each name into a ledger. He assigns room numbers and hands out slips of paper printed with rules for conduct. The list includes quotas, curfew hours, and mandatory weekly health inspections. A nurse in a starched uniform passes each woman a small cotton bag containing toiletries, a bar of soap, a comb, and a thin towel. You run your fingers over the rough fabric, the bag's lightness speaking louder than any welcome. You are shown to a narrow room with 2 cots separated by a low shelf. A single bulb hangs from the ceiling, swaying slightly in the breeze from an open window. Outside, a courtyard spreads between the barracks and the mess hall. Soldiers cross it in lazy arcs, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. In the evening, the compound fills with the sound of boots on wooden floors. A whistle signals the beginning of the night shift. Girls emerge from their rooms in pressed blouses and skirts issued that morning. Their hair is combed into tidy waves. Their faces powdered just enough to mask fatigue. The air smells of talcum and cigarette smoke. You are ushered into a long corridor lined with doors, each marked with a number. An officer explains that soldiers will be sent in groups according to a schedule. You nod, gripping the cotton bag like a talisman. Joke 2 flickers. You could start a betting pool on which number gets called first, but you leave it unspoken. Fact time again. Historians still debate the total number of comfort women involved, with estimates ranging from 50,000 to over 200,000. The lack of surviving records is due in part to deliberate destruction of documents as the war's end approached. The first knock comes quickly. You step aside as another woman opens the door to greet her first visitor. Down the hall, a radio plays a sentimental ballad, its lyrics floating faintly over the sounds of shuffling boots and murmured voices. The girl with the paper fan walks past, slipping the fan into her waistband like a blade. Later, you find yourself on the back step of the barracks, staring out into the dark beyond the fence. The jungle hums with night insects, their rhythm steady and unchanging. You think of the villages these girls came from, the families waiting without knowing, the unmarked roads that led here. You wonder who might still be searching for them. A guard approaches, flashlight beams slicing the night. He tells you it's time to return inside. You nod and follow, the light guiding you back to the numbered doors. The compound settles into its nightly rhythm footsteps, whispers, a gramophone's soft scratch. You lie on your cot, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling. The air smells faintly of soap and rust. The girl with the fan sleeps beside you, her breathing even. You close your eyes and listen to the insects outside, their song wrapping the compound in an illusion of peace. Joke 3 drifts quietly through your mind. If survival were currency, every woman here would be rich beyond counting. You let it fade into the dark, holding instead the image of those painted cranes fanning cool air in a hot, crowded truck. You step off a narrow stone curb into the shimmer of a Paris night. The street lamps spill golden pools onto slick cobblestones, reflecting the marquee lights of a jazz club tucked between shuttered bakeries. Saxophone notes curl into the air, winding up toward wrought-iron balconies where shadows lean and watch. The air smells of tobacco, perfume, and rain lingering in the gutters. A doorman in a black coat tips his hat and waves you inside. The club's interior is dim, with round tables cloaked in red cloth and a haze of cigarette smoke drifting above them. A woman in a green satin gown croons into a microphone, her voice silk wrapped in smoke. Patrons sway in their chairs, their wine glasses catching glints of light. Fact time. During the German occupation of Paris, brothels flourished under official oversight. Certain high-end maisons were frequented by Wehrmacht officers, Gestapo agents, and black market profiteers alike, serving as both pleasure houses and hubs for information gathering. You weave through the crowd to a side door marked Privé. Inside is a narrow corridor that smells faintly of lavender water. Behind one half-closed door, a woman in a silk robe lounges on a chaise, a half-smoked cigarette balanced between her fingers. She nods toward a crystal ashtray and says, "Help yourself if you need it." You light a cigarette and lean against the doorframe. She tells you the man in the corner of the club, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, is a Gestapo informant. He listens more than he drinks, and his smile never reaches his eyes. She warns you to be careful what you say in his presence. You nod, tucking the cigarette between your fingers. Joke 1 comes to mind about putting eavesdropping on his resume, but you keep it inside. A waiter slips past, whispering that a back table is reserved for a German colonel who likes to play cards until dawn. He's rumoured to wager not just money, but information, locations of troop movements, supply depots, even names. Fringe Whisper says, some women feed this intelligence to the resistance, passing it along under the cover of love letters. You return to the main room and watch as the colonel arrives. His boots are polished to a mirror sheen, his coat lined with silver braid. He greets the doorman with a curt nod and makes his way to the table. You notice 2 men follow him inside, one tall with a limp, the other with a scar running from his ear to his collar. They sit close, eyes scanning the room. You take a seat at the bar and order a Kia. The bartender pours slowly, watching the colonel over the rim of the glass. Without looking at you, he murmurs that Gestapo agents have been making surprise visits to Paris brothels in search of resistance couriers and hidden radio transmitters. Historians still argue how effective these sweeps were, given the underground skill at camouflage. The band shifts into an upbeat swing number. Dancers spill onto the small floor, skirts twirling, shoes tapping in time. You sip your drink and let the music carry you for a moment. Joke 2 floats up. You think about telling the bartender that swing music might be the best espionage cover ever invented, but you simply smile. In the corner, a man in a grey suit flips open a cigarette case and offers you one. As you take it, he slides a folded napkin under your hand. You glance down to see a series of numbers scrawled in pencil. You tuck it into your sleeve, keeping your face neutral. The singer's voice dips low for the final verse, and the room falls into a hush. She closes her eyes, holding the last note until it dissolves into the smoke-filled air. Applause swells, polite yet fervent. The colonel claps once, then leans toward his companions, speaking in clipped German. You slip away to the powder room, locking the door behind you. You unfold the napkin. Coordinates. A small star marks a location north of the city. You commit it to memory, then tear the napkin into tiny pieces, flushing them away. The mirror over the basin shows your face framed in soft lamplight. You smooth your hair and apply fresh lipstick. When you return to the main room, the colonel's table is covered with playing cards and neat stacks of francs. The man with the scar watches the door. The woman in the green gown has left the stage, replaced by a trumpet player whose notes blaze hot and bright. A waiter passes you a folded scrap of sheet music. Inside is a line of lyrics written in French. Sous la lune, l'oiseau s'envole. Under the moon, the bird flies away. You know this is a signal. You finish your drink, thank the bartender, and step outside. The street is quieter now, the rain holding off just long enough to let the music trail into the night. You walk toward the Seine, your heels clicking against the cobblestones. At the river's edge, a man in a wool cap waits by the shadows of a bridge. You hand him a single matchbox, the agreed signal that you've passed along tonight's message. He nods once and melts into the darkness. You turn back toward the club, its glow spilling into the street like a beacon. Behind its walls, the night's games will continue until dawn. Joke 3 hovers in your thoughts. Paris may run on wine and music, but its real currency is secrets. You let the idea linger as you step away from the river, your path lit by pools of lamplight and the faint echo of a trumpet's final note. You wake to a damp chill that clings to your bones. The medic on duty pulls back a canvas flap, letting in the thin grey light of morning. Outside, puddles glisten in the ruts left by ambulance wheels. The air carries the tang of coal smoke and something sharper, a faint medicinal bite that settles at the back of your throat. Inside the infirmary tent, folding cots line each wall, their thin mattresses sagging under feverish bodies. A nurse in a starched cap moves briskly between them, balancing a tray of enamel mugs filled with cloudy liquid. She sets one down beside you, explaining that it is quinine water, bitter but useful. You sip and feel its harsh edge coat your tongue. Fact time. By 1942, both Axis and Allied forces were fighting an invisible war against venereal disease. In many field zones, penicillin was scarce or non-existent, and soldiers relied on older treatments like sulfur drugs, quinine, and mercury ointments, each with their own dangers. The nurse checks your pulse, her brow furrowing. She notes something in a ledger and signals for the doctor, who arrives with a battered leather satchel. He asks questions in clipped tones about dizziness, skin sores, and muscle aches. His eyes are tired, but searching. You answer carefully, knowing every symptom can alter your assignment or your freedom. At a nearby cot, a young woman clutches her stomach, sweat pooling at her temples. Her breathing comes in sharp gasps. A medic kneels beside her, murmuring reassurance as he wraps a blood pressure cuff around her arm. She squeezes her eyes shut, whispering a prayer under her breath. The doctor turns back to you and uncaps a tin of grey paste. Its sharp metallic smell makes you flinch. He spreads it across a strip of linen and instructs you to apply it to your skin twice daily. Fringe Whisper says this ointment contains mercury, a treatment older than the century and just as risky as the infection it's meant to cure. Across the tent, a soldier sits on the edge of his cot, scratching at his wrists. His uniform shirt hangs loose, sleeves rolled up to reveal pale welts. A medic hands him a small paper packet and tells him to dissolve its powder into tea. He grimaces, muttering that it tastes like rusted nails. Joke 1 flickers through your mind, maybe they should list that on the ingredients, but you swallow it down. The nurse returns with a small wooden box containing condoms, antiseptic wipes, and a folded instruction sheet. She places it in your lap and says this is your personal protection kit. Her voice is brisk, but her eyes soften briefly. You thank her, fingering the paper sheet worn thin from too many hands. You overhear 2 orderlies whispering near the supply shelves. They speak of an outbreak sweeping a nearby regiment, forcing the closure of several hospitality quarters. One mentions that military command will not list these closures in official reports. Historians still argue how many such cases were concealed to protect troop morale. A bell rings outside, signalling the morning check-in. You pull on your coat and step into the drizzle. The camp yard smells of damp wool and diesel. A line of women shuffles toward a small shed where medical officers record daily health status. You join them, the mud sucking at your boots. Inside the shed, a sergeant with a clipboard marks your name and notes, "Under treatment." He slides a slip of paper across the desk with your restricted duty order. The print is faded, but the meaning is clear. No assignments until further notice. You tuck it into your pocket, feeling its weight. The rain eases as you head toward the mess tent. Soldiers file in with tin trays, steam rising from chipped mugs of tea and bowls of watery porridge. You sit at a corner table, the spoon heavy in your hand. A corporal nearby coughs into his sleeve, his shoulders hunched. You glance at the medic standing in the doorway, who pretends not to notice. Your breakfast is interrupted by a commotion outside. A jeep screeches to a halt, and two stretcher bearers jump down, carrying a limp figure wrapped in a blanket. The medics rush them into the infirmary tent. You catch a glimpse of the girl's face, pale as paper, lips cracked. A damp lock of hair clings to her cheek. You follow at a distance as the medics work over her. The doctor barks for more sulfur powder. A nurse cuts away the girl's sleeve to reveal angry red welts snaking up her arm. Her pulse is thready, her breath shallow. The mercury ointment sits unused on the table. You step back, the air suddenly too thick. The rain patters softly on the tent roof, blending with the rasp of the girl's breathing. Someone switches on a small radio in the corner. Static crackles, then a clipped voice announces troop movements. You wonder how many other announcements mask smaller, hidden emergencies. Later, back in your cot, you unwrap the personal protection kit. The paper crackles as you smooth it across your lap. The condoms look thin, almost brittle. The antiseptic wipes smell sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose. You fold the kit away again, sealing it with a ribbon scavenged from a supply crate. Joke two flits into your thoughts, you consider calling it a survival gift basket. But the humour dies quickly. Outside, the drizzle has stopped. You wander toward the edge of camp, where laundry lines droop under wet uniforms. A few socks are mismatched, stripes against solids. A line of tin buckets sits half full of rainwater. You dip your fingers into one, feeling its chill bite. An orderly passes by with a ledger under his arm. He mutters that a shipment of penicillin is expected next month if supply convoys make it through. Until then, older treatments will have to suffice. Quirky rumour says a French doctor in the city is experimenting with herbal remedies hidden in tea leaves. You imagine tea becoming the new contraband. Back in the mess tent, the nurse offers you a second mug of tea. The steam fogs your vision for a moment. You hold it in both hands, feeling its heat seep through. You sip slowly, letting the bitter comfort settle in your chest. Joke 3 crosses your mind. Maybe the tea is the real medicine, and everything else is theatre. You allow yourself a quiet smile before setting the mug down. Outside, camp life churns on boots in the mud. Orders shouted, engines rumbling to life. Inside the infirmary, cots fill and empty. The quiet war against disease continuing without ceremony. You stand at the doorway for a moment, breathing in the mingled scents of antiseptic and damp earth, before stepping back into the slow, heavy rhythm of another day. You walk along a dirt lane, lined with hedges that once guarded neat gardens, but now hide weeds and tangled briars. Somewhere a rooster crows, though the sun is already high. The air smells faintly of laundry soap and coal ash drifting from chimneys. Up ahead, you hear the thump of a wooden pail being set down. A woman in a faded apron straightens from her washing and peers toward you. Her eyes narrow in cautious recognition before softening into polite reserve. You pass through the village square where a baker sweeps crumbs from a table into his palm. He He nods in greeting but glances quickly toward two older men sitting on a bench. They lean together in conversation, their voices too low to catch. You feel their eyes linger, a heartbeat longer than courtesy requires. Fact time. During wartime, women suspected of keeping company with occupying forces often faced whispered accusations, even without proof. Some were later publicly humiliated after liberation, their reputations stripped as cleanly as their hair. A child tugs at her mother's skirt, whispering something in her ear. The mother hushes her but does not look your way again. The market stalls are half-empty turnips, a few bruised apples, and jars of pickled cabbage. One stallkeeper offers you a coin in change, her fingers brushing yours for the briefest second. Her gaze flicks to the folded paper in your coat pocket, but she says nothing. You stop at the post office to check for mail. The clerk rifles through a stack of envelopes, shaking his head. "No letters today," he says, though his eyes scan your face like he's measuring the truth you carry. Joke one nudges at you. Perhaps you should start mailing yourself letters just to break the silence. But you keep it to yourself. On the walk back, you overhear two women talking behind a laundry line. One mutters about camp followers while wringing out a sheet. The other laughs softly, the sound more brittle than amused. They don't say your name, but their voices tighten as you pass. You keep your pace steady, as if your ears are closed. Outside your small room, you find a wicker basket left on the doorstep. Inside are 2 loaves of bread, still warm, and a note scrawled on butcher's paper, for the days when the village forgets kindness. You glance up and down the lane, but no one is watching. Fringe whisper says there are always a few who offer quiet solidarity, even when public opinion turns its back. You carry the basket inside, setting it on the table beside your tin of tea leaves. The room smells faintly of lavender from the sachet, tucked into your bedding. You cut a thick slice from one loaf and eat it plain, its crust cracking beneath your teeth. Later, you wander to the edge of the fields, where laundry flaps on sagging lines. A man stacking hay pauses to watch you. He spits into the grass before returning to his work. You wonder if his glance holds pity, suspicion, or both. Historians still argue whether wartime communities judged from morality, survival, or envy when targeting women in this way. Near the well, an elderly woman draws water into a tin pail. She tells you in a low voice that the gendarmes came yesterday, asking about strangers in the village. She says she mentioned no names. Her hand trembles as she adjusts her scarf, and you suspect her caution comes at a cost. You thank her, and head toward the lane where children play with a hoop and stick. They fall silent as you pass, the hoop rolling lopsided into a ditch. One boy retrieves it without looking at you. The air is thick with unspoken rules. Joke 2 flickers you imagine announcing you've come to teach them a new game, gossip tag, but you let the thought dissolve. Back home, you find an envelope slid under your door. Inside is a clipped newspaper column about the reconstruction of moral order after the war. The language is stiff, the tone paternal. You fold it and place it between the pages of a notebook already crowded with such scraps. The notebook feels heavier each week. By evening, clouds gather over the rooftops. You light the oil lamp and sit at your table, tearing a stale heel of bread into your soup. Outside, footsteps crunch on gravel, then stop. You freeze, listening. A soft knock follows, so faint it could be the wind. You open the door to find no one, only a sprig of rosemary lying on the step. Quirky rumour says rosemary wards off both illness and ill will. You tuck it behind the breadbasket like a talisman. Rain begins to patter against the shutters, its rhythm steady. You sit back in your chair, cupping your hands around the soup bowl, letting the heat soak into your palms. Somewhere beyond the storm, the village carries on washing hung, benches warmed by quiet gossip, loaves baked in brick ovens. You feel both part of it and apart from it. Joke 3 comes gently. You could tell the next person who asks that you're just here for the bread, but you leave it unsaid, keeping it for yourself like the rosemary. As night falls, you push the shutters open a crack. The rain has turned the cobblestones slick and silver under the street lamp. You watch the water trace its way between the stones, flowing towards some unseen drain. In that movement you sense your own persistence, still here, still moving, despite every sidelong glance and whispered word. You sit at a wooden desk in a dim records office, the dust motes dancing in the thin stripe of sunlight from a half-drawn curtain. Outside, a church bell tolls noon, its sound flattening against the stone walls of the narrow street. A stack of folders teeters beside you, their edges soft with age, their labels written in different hands. The clerk across the room shuffles papers with the patience of someone who has done this for years. Fact time. Historians have wrestled for decades with the question of how many women were coerced into military brothels during the Second World War. Estimates range widely from tens of thousands to well over 200,000, partly because so many records were destroyed before liberation. You open the first file and find a typed list of names, some with birth years, others with only the vaguest identifying details. Korean, age about 17. Dutch, no family. The ink has faded, but the strokes still carry the cold precision of a bureaucratic inventory. You trace one line with your fingertip, wondering how far the girl behind it travelled before her name landed here. In another folder, you discover a map peppered with red dots, each marking a known or suspected station. Alongside the map is a memo stamped with an official seal, detailing supply needs soap, linen, quinine, and, in clipped language, monthly medical reports. Historians still argue whether such documents represent genuine oversight or simply an attempt to maintain the machinery of exploitation under a veneer of order. From across the desk, the clerk clears his throat and leans over, pointing to a footnote at the bottom of one page. It reads, "Incomplete further evidence destroyed in compliance with orders dated August 1945. He raises his eyebrows, then returns to his stack. Joke one flickers you imagine adding evidence eraser as a wartime occupation in its own right, but you tuck it away. A box labelled unverified testimonies rests under the desk. You slide it toward you and lift the lid. Inside are sheets of onion, skin paper filled with faint pencil script. The handwriting varies, some tidy, some jagged, as if written in haste. You scan fragments. Taken at night. Promised sewing work. Not allowed to write home. The words hang in the air like the remnants of a half-heard confession. You pause at a letter written in ink so pale it is almost ghostly. It tells of a journey from a fishing village to a foreign barracks, of work that was never work, of illness left untreated until it left scars. No signature remains, only the closing, "Please tell them we were real." On a separate table sits a ledger bound in cracked leather. The dates run in tidy order for months, then abruptly stop. The final entry is a single line, no explanation, no figures before the page is left blank. Fringe whisper says some officials, sensing the war's end, deliberately left their ledgers incomplete to protect themselves from later inquiries. The room smells faintly of ink and must. You notice a small safe in the corner. Its door is ajar, and inside you glimpse rolls of microfilm sealed in paper tubes. The clerk says they're from confiscated archives, but have not yet been translated. He shrugs, adding that some might be duplicate copies or nothing at all. Historians, he says, never agree on what's worth keeping. You step to the window and push the curtain aside. The street outside is quiet, the stone warmed by the midday sun. A bicycle leans against a lamppost, its tyres patched and worn. You imagine riding through the city delivering these testimonies to anyone willing to listen. Joke, too, rises. You could leave the files in cafe chairs and let curious strangers piece the history together. But you know few would understand the weight they carried. On the far wall, a corkboard holds a scattering of faded photographs. Faces stare back, some solemn, others caught mid-laugh. The captions are brief. First name, place, year. No mention of what followed. You find yourself lingering on one image of a young woman with a ribbon tied at her collar. She could be anyone's sister, daughter, friend. The The clerk calls your attention to a thin envelope addressed in a looping European hand. Inside is a single sheet describing a transfer of 20 women from one station to another. The location names have been blotted out, leaving only smears of black ink. He shrugs again, saying this is typical records preserved just enough to prove they existed, stripped of the details that matter. A calendar on the wall still marks April 1945-inch faded print. You imagine the hands that turned those pages once, stopping suddenly at the month when the war began to shift. You wonder how many truths were folded away forever during those weeks. Joke 3 nudges in perhaps April 1945 should be called the month of convenient amnesia, but you let it rest. You close the folders, stack them neatly, and slide the box of testimonies back under the desk. The air in the room feels heavier now, as if the paper has soaked up all the silence it can hold. Outside, the bell tolls again, its sound chasing you into the sunlight. You walk slowly down the narrow street, each footstep tapping out the echo of unanswered questions. Somewhere, someone still remembers every name, every red dot on that map, and until those memories are brought into the open, the numbers will remain a battleground all their own. You stand at the edge of a crossroads where the air feels thick with decision. Behind you, the low hum of a passing column of soldiers fades into the distance. Ahead, 2 roads stretch in opposite directions, one toward the retreating front lines, the other into the uncertain calm of a newly occupied town. Your boots are caked with mud, your satchel heavier than you remember packing it. The horizon glows faintly with fires still burning, where artillery shells found their mark. You watch smoke drift into the evening sky, dissolving into violet shadows. Somewhere, a dog barks twice and goes silent. The air carries the scent of charred timber, mingled with the faint sweetness of early spring blossoms. Fact time. As frontlines shifted during the last years of the war, many civilians working under military control were forced to decide whether to follow withdrawing forces or remain behind. Both choices carried peril retribution from advancing troops or suspicion from retreating ones. A farmer's cart rattles past, drawn by a skeletal horse. The driver's eyes meet yours briefly before flicking away. You catch sight of a bundle under the cart's canvas flap, the shape too angular to be just farm tools. You imagine it as someone's hurriedly hidden keepsakes, smuggled past whichever uniform happens to control the next checkpoint. You step into the shade of a hedgerow and watch a pair of women push a pram loaded not with a child, but with sacks of flour and a battered kettle. Their conversation is low and urgent, punctuated by quick glances toward the road behind them. You wonder if they, too, are deciding which road to take. Joke 1 curls at the edge of your mind. You think about asking if they take passengers, but you let it stay unspoken. A burst of motor noise announces the arrival of a convoy. Trucks roll to a halt at the junction, engines idling. An officer hops down from the lead vehicle and consults a map. His men scan the fields, eyes hard with calculation. One calls out a warning about possible partisan movement in the hills. The officer waves him off and orders the convoy to split half toward the city, half toward the forest road. A young soldier lingers by the last truck, lighting a cigarette. He offers you one without speaking. You accept, the match flaring between you like a fragile truce. The smoke tastes of damp, tobacco and fatigue. He glances at your satchel and says softly, "Whichever way you choose, don't look back." His words settle in your mind like a final instruction. When the trucks move on, the crossroads is quiet again. You trace your boot across the dirt, marking a shallow line between the two paths. Fringe Whisper says, "Some people in these moments simply walked straight into the fields, avoiding either road entirely, gambling on the cover of night to guide them somewhere safer." You test the weight of your satchel. Inside are a few coins, a loaf of bread, a water flask, and a packet of folded papers you've guarded for weeks. The papers carry names and dates that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Historians still argue whether such documents were best hidden, destroyed, or delivered at any cost. A rustle in the hedge startles you. A boy no older than 12 steps out, clutching a satchel nearly as large as his torso. He looks up at you with clear, defiant eyes and asks if the road to the city is safe. You hesitate, then tell him the truth you don't know. He nods once, adjusts the satchel strap, and strides toward the fading glow of the city lights. The sun dips lower, spilling a wash of gold across the fields. You think of the people you've left behind, and those you might yet meet, depending on the path you choose. Joke 2 tugs at you. You could toss a coin and let fate decide, but you know this choice deserves more than chance. In the distance, the sound of boots crunching gravel draws closer. You can make out figures moving in formation, their silhouettes bending with the slope of the road. The sight hardens your resolve. If they are retreating troops, you have minutes to slip away before questions begin. You step toward the road leading into the forest. The air there is cooler, scented with pine and damp soil. The canopy above muffles the distant echoes of conflict, replacing them with the drip of melting snow from the branches. Your steps quicken as the shadows close in around you. Half an hour later, you emerge into a clearing where a small group has gathered around a fire. Their faces are turned toward its glow, the flames painting their features in flickers of orange. One man looks up, eyes scanning you for recognition. When he says, "We leave at dawn," you feel a rush of something between relief and fear. You settle by the fire, wrapping your hands around the heat. The satchel rests in your lap, its weight familiar now. The choice is made, but the road ahead is a blank page. Joke 3 surfaces. You think about telling the group you took the scenic route, but you keep it in your mind, letting the warmth of the fire answer for you. Above, the sky has deepened into indigo. Stars prick through, their cold light steady against the shifting glow of the fire. You lean back on your elbows, listening to the low murmur of voices and the occasional pop of sap in the flames. The war moves on in both directions, but for this night, you've chosen your place within it. You stand in the cool marble hallway of a military courthouse, your footsteps swallowed by the hush of early morning. Outside, the street is still wet from last night's rain, and the clouds hang low over the rooftops like a lid keeping the city's breath shallow. The faint smell of polish and old paper clings to the air. Inside the main chamber, rows of wooden benches face a long table draped with green cloth. At its centre sits a stack of folders, each one marked with a number in black ink. Uniformed guards stand at the rear doors, their hands clasped behind their backs. A clock ticks somewhere out of sight, each second stretched thin. Fact time. After the war, some military courts convened to examine whether the organised exploitation of women in occupied territories constituted a prosecutable war crime. While a few trials resulted in convictions, many were dismissed for lack of jurisdiction or insufficient evidence. A woman in a plain grey dress sits at the witness table, hands folded tightly in her lap. She glances toward the gallery but finds no familiar faces. Her hair is neatly pinned, yet a loose strand curls down her cheek. A translator leans close to murmur in her ear, his voice low and even. The prosecutor rises and begins reading from a statement. His words are precise, deliberate, and heavy with formality. He describes regulations issued by occupying forces, the establishment of controlled stations, and the documented accounts of women forced to serve under threat. Historians still debate whether such presentations were intended to illuminate the truth or to fit it neatly within legal boundaries that could be managed and contained. From the defence table, an officer in a pressed uniform leans back in his chair, arms crossed. He watches the prosecutor with a faint smirk, his boots polished to a gleam. His counsel, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, jots notes in a small ledger. The scratch of the pen feels louder than it should. The first exhibit is brought forward, a typed set of regulations stamped with an official seal. The clerk places them before the judges, who examine them without expression. You can see the red ink of one clause, provision of adequate health measures for the protection of troops. The language is clinical, stripped of human cost. Joke 1 flits through your mind. Perhaps they should have listed morality alongside mosquito control, but you leave it unspoken. The witness is asked to describe her recruitment. Her voice trembles as she explains being told she would work as a seamstress, only to be sent to a barracks where soldiers queued outside her door. She pauses, clasping her hands tighter. The translator's voice carries her words into the chamber, each syllable settling over the room like fine dust. A second witness takes the stand, this one a medic who served in a garrison clinic. He testifies to performing weekly examinations under orders, recording results in ledgers that were later burned. He recalls at least 2 women who died of untreated infections because supplies were withheld. The judges listen, pens poised, but still. Fringe Whisper says some courts relied heavily on medical personnel for testimony, not out of sympathy but because their accounts carried the perceived neutrality of science. In reality, neutrality was rare. The defense begins its cross-examination. Questions circle the witnesses like hawks, probing for inconsistencies, pressing on the absence of written orders, challenging memories blurred by years. One lawyer suggests that voluntary service was common. The air in the room cools perceptibly. You watch the woman in grey shift in her seat. Her gaze falls on the courtroom floor, on the faint scuffs in the wood left by countless shoes. You wonder if she imagines herself walking out the door instead of answering another question. Joke. 2 brushes against your mind. You could swear the defence has mistaken this trial for a theatre audition, but the gravity of the moment keeps it silent. A recess is called. People spill into the hallway where sunlight now filters through high windows. Conversations spark in small knots, journalists scribbling, aides whispering, officers lighting cigarettes. A young clerk offers you a cup of weak coffee in a chipped mug. The bitter steam curls into your face. When the court reconvenes, closing statements are delivered. The prosecutor speaks of justice, delayed but not forgotten. The defense warns against setting precedents that could tarnish military reputations. Both sides appeal to history, though from different altitudes. The judges withdraw to deliberate. The room falls into a peculiar stillness. The witness in grey remains at her table, fingers drumming softly on the wood. Across from her, the officer leans back, arms still crossed, gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the room. When the verdict is read hours later, it lands without fanfare, guilty on select charges, acquittal on others. Sentences are lighter than the stories would seem to warrant. The judges stand, the guards step forward, and the moment dissolves into movement. You leave the courthouse into a street rinsed clean by the morning's rain. People hurry past, umbrellas tilting against the breeze. In your pocket, you carry a slip of paper with the day's outcome. It feels lighter than the truth deserves. Joke 3 nudges into your thoughts. You could almost believe justice travels with a ration card, given how sparingly it's distributed, but you keep it for yourself. The wind carries the faint toll of a distant bell. You walk toward it, your steps echoing off wet stone, thinking of the testimony that will never see a courtroom and the witnesses who will never be called. Some verdicts, you know, are written only in memory. You wake in the small hours, the air heavy and still. The barracks are quiet, except for the sound of someone turning in their cot. Outside, wind nudges a loose shutter, the faint tap carrying through the darkness like an uneven heartbeat. You keep your eyes open, tracing the faint lines of shadow across the ceiling. Sleep clings stubbornly at the edges, but will not cross into your mind. The blanket over you is rough wool, coarse enough to prickle your skin. You shift, trying to find a comfortable angle. Your thoughts drift without asking permission. Faces flash, some familiar, some half forgotten, and each one leaves a faint mark as it goes. The silence seems to magnify every memory until they fill the room like slow-moving smoke. Fact time. Many survivors of wartime sexual exploitation reported long-term psychological after-effects, including nightmares, sudden panic attacks, and what later came to be called post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time, there were no official names for these conditions, only vague references to nervous strain or melancholia. You close your eyes, willing yourself to sink into darkness, but the past presses in like a wall. A sudden sound, a kettle clattering in the kitchen below, snaps your eyes open again. Your pulse quickens, then slows as you recognize it for what it is. Joke 1 drifts into your mind. You could almost startle yourself awake just by sneezing. In the next cot, someone mutters in their sleep. The words are too slurred to make out, but the tone is urgent. You wonder what they see behind closed eyes. The room smells faintly of soap, damp clothes, and the ghost of last night's supper. You turn onto your side, staring at the thin curtain that separates your bed from the narrow aisle. Your hand reaches for the small tin you keep by your pillow. Inside is a photograph creased, corners soft of a group smiling at a summer picnic. You study it until the lines blur, trying to anchor yourself to a memory that still feels safe. Historians still argue whether keeping such mementos eased or deepened the pain for survivors. When the first light seeps through the cracks in the shutter, you rise quietly. Your feet find the worn slippers under the cot, the ones with a threadbare patch at the heel. The floorboards are cool under your soles as you cross to the basin in the corner. The water in the pitcher is cold enough to sting your fingertips. You splash your face and inhale sharply. In the mirror's warped reflection, you catch the shadows under your eyes. You smooth your hair, then tie it back with a ribbon saved from an old parcel. The movement steadies your breathing. Downstairs, the kitchen is empty except for a woman stirring porridge over a low flame. She glances up, offers a faint smile, and sets an extra bowl on the table. You thank her and take a seat. The spoon feels heavy in your hand, but the warmth of the porridge begins to unknot something in your chest. A young man enters, his coat still dusted with the night's damp. He says the streets are quiet, that the fog is thick over the river. He pours tea and sets a mug in front of you without asking. You murmur your thanks and take a careful sip. The steam warms your face. The conversation drifts to trivialities: the price of bread, the shortage of lamp oil, a cat that refuses to leave the woodpile. These small topics are like stones in a shallow stream, giving you something steady to step on. Joke 2 brushes by. You could suggest the cat run for mayor, since it's clearly holding its ground better than most. Later, you walk to the edge of the river. The fog curls low, blurring the opposite bank. The water laps gently at the stones, and somewhere a gull calls. You close your eyes and listen. The cool, damp air clings to your skin, but it feels cleaner than the air inside your thoughts. Fringe Whisper says some people who lived through the war kept walking routes they had once used in fear, returning to them over and over, as if reclaiming the ground. You find yourself tracing one such path now, your boots crunching over familiar gravel. By the time you return, the day has begun in earnest. The kitchen clatters with pans, voices rise and fall, and the scent of baking bread drifts down the hall. You pause in the doorway, letting the ordinary noise settle around you. Joke 3 hovers. You could say this smells like courage in loaf form, but instead you just smile and take a seat at the long table. The warmth of the bread, the steady rhythm of voices, and the scrape of cutlery become a quiet shield against the hours ahead. The shadows in your mind are still there, but for now they are at the edges, blurred by the light coming through the window, and in this small moment, you can breathe without counting the seconds. You step into the clinic's front room, its whitewashed walls already dulled by years of smoke from the coal stove. The air smells of disinfectant, boiled cloth, and the faint metallic tang of surgical instruments. A row of wooden chairs lines one wall, their seats polished by countless visitors shifting under the weight. Outside, wind rattles the bare branches against the window panes. The receptionist, a middle-aged man in a frayed vest, asks for your name and writes it in a ledger with careful strokes. His pen squeaks faintly on the paper. He hands you a small numbered token and tells you to wait until it's called fact time. After the war, many women who had been trapped in military brothels sought medical help for untreated injuries, infections, and long-term effects of abuse. Official clinics often offered only basic services, while unregulated private treatments ranged from experimental hormone injections to crude surgeries. On the far side of the room, a young woman cradles a hot water bottle against her stomach. Beside her, a grandmotherly figure knits, the clicking needles keeping time with the coughs of a man hunched in the corner. You find an empty chair and sit, feeling the weight of the token in your hand. A nurse in a grey smock appears at the doorway, calling 2 numbers ahead of yours. Her voice is brisk, but her eyes linger on each patient for a moment longer than formality requires. You notice she wears sturdy boots with scuffed toes, practical for long hours on her feet. When your turn comes, you follow her into a small examination room. The single window is fogged over, blurring the street outside into a wash of grey. She gestures for you to sit on the wooden chair beside the desk. The doctor, a narrow-faced man with silver hair, leafs through a stack of case notes before glancing up. He begins with questions how long the pain has lasted, whether you've had fever, if you've noticed any changes since the last visit. You answer carefully, aware that each reply might dictate the treatment offered. Joke 1 brushes at your mind. You could tell him the real change is the size of his waiting list, but you keep it quiet. He listens with a stethoscope that smells faintly of alcohol, the cold bell pressed against your back. He makes a note, then reaches into a drawer and produces a small vial of pale liquid. He explains it is a hormone supplement, newly popular but not without side effects. You nod, unsure whether the offer is generosity or an experiment in disguise. Fringe Whisper says some post-war clinics tested such treatments on vulnerable patients without fully explaining the risks. Historians still discuss whether these experiments aim to heal or to gather data. The nurse prepares the injection, her hands steady as she swabs your arm. The prick is sharp but brief. She places a small square of gauze over the spot and tapes it down. Then she offers a folded sheet with instructions, including a list of foods to avoid. You scan it, noticing that half the suggestions are nearly impossible to follow when the ration queue runs short. In the corner, a cabinet stands slightly ajar, revealing neatly stacked brown bottles with handwritten labels. The nurse catches your glance and quietly mentions their morphine ampules locked and accounted for by law, but sometimes traded on the black market. She lowers her voice to say that in certain alleyways, 1 ampule can fetch enough to buy a week's worth of bread. She leads you back to the reception area, where a small boy offers you a boiled sweet from his pocket. You thank him, unwrapping it carefully. The sugar is coarse, its sweetness edged with mint. Joke 2 slips through. You consider telling him it's the best prescription of the day, but you simply smile. Outside, the cold air nips at your cheeks. You walk past the back alley where 2 men in wool caps lean against the wall. One of them catches your eye and nods toward a crate at his feet. The smell of strong spirits wafts out when he lifts the lid. Among the bottles, you spot a few of those morphine ampules, their labels hidden under strips of paper. You keep walking, your pulse quickening. Further down the street, a small herbalist's shop glows with lamplight. Inside, shelves are lined with jars of dried leaves and roots. The shopkeeper offers you a tin of chamomile, assuring you it will help with sleep. You buy it, tucking it into your satchel. Quirky rumour says some people lace chamomile tea with a pinch of powdered valerian to make dreams heavier. By the time you reach your room, the sky has shifted to a deep steel blue. You light the oil lamp and set the tea tin on the table. The gauze on your arm itches faintly where the injection went in. You boil water, spoon chamomile into a chipped cup, and watch the steam curl upward in slow spirals. Joke 3 floats by. You could tell someone you're brewing bravery by the cup, but you let it pass in silence. As you sip the tea, warmth spreads from your throat down to your chest. The day's cold and the sting in your arm seem to fade. You lean back in your chair, listening to the slow drip of the tap in the basin. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes the hour. The morphine ampules, the untested hormones, the black market whispers, all of it recedes for now. You focus instead on the small comfort in your hands, the way steam clouds the air, and the quiet promise of rest that might finally follow. The morning train sighs into the station, brakes squealing, a thin cloud of steam curling above its iron bulk. The platform smells of damp wool coats and coal smoke. People shuffle forward, each clutching a paper ticket or a scrap of permission slip, eyes darting toward uniformed inspectors. You keep your satchel close against your side, feeling the crinkle of folded documents inside. A conductor in a navy cap calls for boarding. Passengers stream toward the open carriage doors, their boots clicking against the wet boards. You step into a compartment with wooden benches polished by years of use. A young soldier slides his pack onto the luggage rack and takes the seat across from you. His uniform is rumpled, but his boots gleam with recent polish. Fact time. After the war, many survivors of forced wartime labour, including those from military brothels, faced difficult journeys home. Some travelled under false names to avoid stigma or official questioning, while others carried forged documents provided by aid groups or sympathetic locals. The train lurches into motion, the rhythm of wheels on track settling into a steady pulse. You glance out the window as the city recedes rows of shuttered houses, laundry lines sagging between them, children waving from stoops. In the distance, a factory chimney smokes thin and grey. Across the aisle, an elderly woman opens a wicker basket, producing a bundle wrapped in cloth. She peels it back to reveal boiled eggs, rye bread, and a twist of salt in paper. She offers you half of an egg, the yolk bright against the dim compartment. You thank her, biting into its chalky softness. Joke one flits by. You could tell her it's the best dining car in Europe, but you smile instead. A conductor appears, checking papers with brisk efficiency. You hand over your travel permit, watching his eyes scan the faded stamp. He hesitates, then nods and moves on. Relief loosens the knot in your chest. The soldier across from you begins humming a tune under his breath, something with a lilting rise and fall. He catches your glance and says, it's an old folk song from his village. He asks where you're headed, and you offer the vaguest answer you can: north. He nods, without pressing. At the next stop, a woman in a Red Cross armband boards, carrying a satchel of pamphlets. She hands you one, its cover printed with bold letters about rebuilding lives and finding work. Inside, there's a section on rehabilitation centres for displaced women. Historians still argue whether such programs were genuine support or thinly disguised moral re-education. Through the window, fields stretch toward the horizon, broken by the occasional cottage or stand of trees. Crows wheel above a ploughed furrow, their dark wings flashing in the pale sunlight. You rest your head against the window frame, the vibration humming through your bones. The soldier offers you a boiled sweet from a small tin. The peppermint scent is sharp, clearing the smoke from your throat. You take it, the sugar gritty against your tongue. Fringe Whisper says certain aid workers used sweets as a quiet sign of safety when meeting survivors in transit, an unspoken promise that no questions would be asked. At midday, the train slows for a rural station. The platform is quiet, just a few villagers with baskets of apples and jars of pickled beets. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and damp leaves. A boy runs alongside the carriage, waving until the train pulls away. The compartments grow warmer as the sun climbs higher. You remove your coat and fold it over your lap. The Red Cross worker moves through the carriage, offering tea from a large thermos. The enamel mug warms your hands. You sip, letting the tannic bitterness settle in your mouth. The soldier mentions his stop is soon. He gathers his pack, stands, and nods toward you. Safe road, he says simply. You return the nod, watching him disappear into the crowd at the next station. Hours later, the train rounds a bend into a valley. You see a cluster of houses, a church steeple, and a narrow river glinting in the light. The conductor announces the final destination in a voice worn smooth by repetition. You step down onto the platform, the boards creaking under your weight. Around you, people scatter toward waiting carts or footpaths into the hills. You take a deep breath. The air cooler here, tinged with pine and distant chimney smoke. Joke, 2 edges in, you could tell yourself the journey home is just a scenic detour, but the weight in your satchel says otherwise. You walk beyond the station, past a low stone wall and into a dirt lane lined with bare-branched trees. Your boots crunch on the frost-rimmed ground. Somewhere ahead, the lane will meet another road, and that road will lead you either toward the safety you've been chasing or another crossing still to come. For now, you keep walking. The sound of the train fades, replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own steps. The lane narrows, the air stills, and the cold presses close. Joke 3 brushes your mind. You could call this stretch the scenic route to uncertainty, but you let it stay unspoken, saving your breath for the miles ahead. The sun lowers toward the ridge, casting the path in gold. You follow it, each step a small claim on the life waiting beyond the horizon. You stand on the edge of a quiet road where the frost has only just begun to lift. Beyond the hedgerow, a cluster of low farmhouses leans against the slope, their roofs patched with mismatched tiles. The smell of wood smoke drifts from one chimney, carrying the faint sweetness of peat. Somewhere, a chicken clucks once and falls silent again. A farmer in a wool cap pushes open a gate and walks towards you. His boots are caked in mud, his breath hanging in the crisp air. He looks you over, not unkindly, and asks if you're passing through or looking for work. You tell him passing through, and he nods, as though that answers more than the question. Fact time. In the months after liberation, many survivors of wartime sexual exploitation avoided returning to their hometowns. Fear of shame, rejection, or violent reprisal led some to seek work in rural areas under assumed names, blending into the rhythms of agricultural life. The farmer gestures toward a cart in the yard, piled high with sacks of potatoes. He says he could use help loading it before the next market run. You step through the gate and grasp the coarse fabric of the first sack. It's heavier than it looks, but you lift it onto the cart, the weight grounding you in the present. Joke 1 drifts in. You could almost call this resistance training, but you keep it to yourself. A woman emerges from the farmhouse carrying a tin pail of milk. She offers you a cup, the surface still frothy from pouring. The milk is cool and sweet, leaving a thin coat on your tongue. She studies you for a moment before asking where you've come from. You offer the same vague north you gave the soldier on the train. She accepts it without pressing. The work is steady and plain lifting, stacking, wiping mud from the last few potatoes before they join the pile. Your hands ache, but the ache feels honest. The farmer hums a tune as he checks the harness on the mule. You recognize it as a folk song you've heard in more than one country. Its words shifting from village to village, but the melody always the same. By midday, the frost has gone from the yard. You sit on an upturned crate with a heel of bread and a wedge of cheese. The farmer's wife sets down a crock of pickled onions, the brine sharp enough to sting your eyes. You spear one with the tip of your knife, its tang cutting through the bread's heaviness. Historians still debate whether rural work offered true refuge for displaced women, or merely delayed the reckoning that came when they tried to claim a new life in the open. In the afternoon, a neighbour arrives with a crate of apples. She eyes you curiously, but says nothing, choosing instead to talk about the weather and the price of eggs. She leaves 2 apples on the crate by your feet. You thank her, biting into one. The crispness cracks in your mouth. Joke 2 rises. You could claim it's the crunch of freedom, but you just smile into the bite. The cart is ready by late afternoon. The farmer asks if you want to ride along to the market in the next village. You agree, climbing up beside him on the wooden bench. The road winds between hedges and open fields, the cold air tugging at your hair. The mule's hooves strike a steady rhythm on the packed dirt. As the village comes into view, you see the bustle of stalls being set up in the square. A man strings onions from a beam, a woman lays out knitted scarves, and children chase each other around a cart of cabbages. The air is thick with the smell of roasting chestnuts. You help unload the potatoes, stacking them neatly by the stall. Coins clink in the farmer's hand as the first customers arrive. He gives you a small bag of chestnuts in thanks, their shells still warm from the fire. You peel one and pop it into your mouth. the heat almost too much against your tongue. When the market begins to slow, the farmer asks if you'll stay on a few more days. There's more work before the frost sets in for good. You tell him you'll think on it, though part of you knows the pause in travel is tempting. Quirky Whisper says that more than one person found their new name in a place like this, carrying it forward as if it had always been theirs. As dusk falls, you ride back to the farm in the quiet. The mule plods steadily, the cart rocking in a slow rhythm. You clutch the bag of chestnuts, the warmth seeping through the paper into your hands. Joke 3 slips in. You could tell yourself this is your winter supply of courage, but you let it stay tucked in the bag with the chestnuts. Back at the farmhouse, the lamp in the kitchen window glows against the dark. The farmer's wife waves you in for supper, the smell of stew curling into the cold air. You step down from the cart, boots crunching on the frosted earth, and walk toward the light. For tonight the road can wait. You sit at a small desk in a room with peeling wallpaper, its faded floral print curling at the seams. Outside, a late winter drizzle patters against the window, the glass fogged where your breath meets the cold. The lamp on the desk casts a thin circle of light over the scattered pages before you. Some are letters you never sent, others are notes you jotted in haste and forgot to finish. Together, they look like a story trying to take shape. The coal stove in the corner clicks softly as it cools. You reach for a cup of tea gone lukewarm, swirling it once before taking a sip. The taste is faintly bitter, a reminder of how long it's been sitting. You draw one of the pages closer and begin to read, your own handwriting catching you off guard with its sharp edges and hurried strokes. Fact time. In the years following the war, testimonies from women who had been forced into sexual service were often collected quietly, with no clear path to justice. Many accounts ended up in private archives, family trunks, or forgotten drawers, surviving only because someone could not bring themselves to throw them away. You turn a page and see the name of a friend written in the margin, circled twice. You remember her voice, low and steady, even when the rest of you trembled. The memory sits heavy in your chest. You set the page aside and reach for another one, written on the back of a ration form. It's a fragment half a sentence about a night when the air was too still, the lamps too dim. Historians still argue whether such scraps can stand as truth when the official record remains silent. The window rattles in its frame as a gust passes. You glance out at the narrow street, nearly empty except for a boy carrying a loaf of bread under his coat. He moves quickly, head down against the rain. Joke 1 rises. You could swear bread runs faster than people here, but it fades before reaching your lips. You open a drawer and take out a small tin box. Inside are mementos, a silk ribbon, a theatre ticket stub, a key without a lock. Each one carries its own weight. You hold the key in your palm, wondering if the door it once opened still stands. At the edge of the desk sits a stack of envelopes tied with twine. You untie the bundle and skim the top letter. The ink is blurred, as if the writer's hand shook or the paper was caught in rain. It speaks of a plan to leave for another country, of starting again where no one knows the past. You read it twice before tucking it back into the stack. In the distance, church bells begin to chime the hour. Their echo carries faintly through the damp air. You gather the pages into a neater pile, aligning their edges, smoothing the corners. Your hands linger on them, unsure whether to keep them safe or send them on to someone who might use them. Fringe Whisper says a few women hid their stories in recipe books or hymnals, trusting that the words would survive disguised among ordinary things. Perhaps that's what you're doing now, choosing a hiding place over an ending. You light another lamp, the warmer glow pushing back the dim corners of the room. The drizzle outside turns to a soft, steady rain. On the street below, a man in a flat cap hurries past with a newspaper tucked under his arm. You imagine tomorrow's headlines and wonder how many will speak of the lives tucked quietly away in rooms like this. A knock at the door startles you. It's a neighbour bringing a loaf wrapped in brown paper. She says the baker had extras and thought you might want one. You thank her, setting it on the table beside the tea. The smell of warm crust fills the room. Joke 2 brushes by. You could tell her she's just interrupted a summit of important papers, but you let it go with a smile. The rain eases to a mist. You strike a match and light the small candle on the desk, its flame swaying in the draught. You look over the pile of pages once more, then slip them into the tin box and close the lid. The click of metal feels final, but not absolute. You carry the box to the wardrobe and slide it onto the highest shelf, behind a folded blanket. It will be safe there for now. The truth it holds can wait until the right eyes are ready to see it. Joke 3 lingers quietly. You could tell yourself history is just waiting for a good filing system, but you keep it tucked away with the rest. You return to the desk, pick up the still warm loaf, and tear off a piece. The crust crunches under your teeth, the inside soft and steaming. Outside, the street glistens under the fading rain, lamplight pooling in the hollows of the cobblestones. In this small room, with bread in your hand and the sound of water trickling from the eaves, you allow yourself a rare thing: stillness. The pages will remain, the rain will fall, and you will go on. The rain outside softens to a hush, each drop a faint patter against the glass. The lamplight pools warmly around you, blurring the edges of the room. You lean back in your chair, feeling the weight in your shoulders loosen. The air carries the simple comfort of bread cooling on the table, of a kettle just beginning to murmur on the stove. In the quiet, you notice your breathing fall into a slow, even rhythm. The street beyond the window is nearly empty now, save for the occasional shadow moving past. Somewhere in the distance, a dog gives one soft bark, then nothing more. The night is tucking itself in. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the faint crackle of the candle wick and the rhythm of the rain blend together. The world outside may keep its unfinished business, but in here, the hours belong entirely to you. The blanket draped over the back of your chair slips easily around your shoulders. Its weight is gentle, like a hand resting in reassurance. You take another slow breath and imagine the first clear morning light breaking over the rooftops, the air fresh and untroubled. Tonight, you need only stay in this warmth, this stillness, until sleep finds you. The pages are safe, the rain is kind, and your heart, for now, can rest.